Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the rest of y'all. Welcome back into my Iranians out there. Salah Mubarak. Happy Persian New Year. And we are back live 2 weeks out, a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on when you're arriving in Miami. You know the drill though. Use code YTMAG, get 10% off of your Bitcoin 2022 tickets. It's the only way Chris and I are going to keep it hanging out with you guys. Otherwise, they're going to give us that little broomstick and put it around our necks and whoop. But in the meantime, we got plenty of news in a jam-packed episode. We'll be joined by the Simply Bitcoin team. It's going to be a fun little chat. We'll be talking just about the Bitcoin markets at large and what they're noticing and some of their thoughts and comments on that. Then we're going to be joined by Dr. Jeff Ross himself over from Valeshire Capital, just to talk a little bit about broader equity markets and how they're impacted both by Bitcoin and how Bitcoin's being impacted by it. We're seeing a lot of topsy-turvy stuff out of those markets. And of course, we'll have a new episode of The Breakup with Nolan. I'm joined by my fearless co-host, Chris. Chris, how you doing, man? Happy Monday.
Doing well, man. Happy Monday. Really excited for it. I'm really excited for the conference. We're 17 days out. I know prices increased on Friday, but it's not too late. People can still get their tickets. Definitely use YTMAG for 10% off your conference tickets. We're excited to have a good time in Miami. I know Q and I are going to be working like dogs while we are there, but we're excited to have a good time there as well in the evenings. It's just going to be very long days for us, but really looking forward to it. Q, anything else for you?
Guys, you know the drill. Buy a ticket on live. We'll make it rain sats for you. We'll have a few sats drops today throughout today's episode as well. And I know I brought this up and I will continue to bring it up, but you see me in Miami and I'm not too busy working, hit me up. I'll definitely have some good, and we can roll one up together. But let's dive into the news. We've got a lot of stuff going on. We have, we can run headlines first, or let's just go one at a time. I think it's worth our time to bring this one up. We have some colleagues down in Brazil. Any of you who are down in Brazil, have friends or family in Brazil, the messaging app Telegram is now considered illegal in Brazil, carrying a $20,000 fine if you're caught using the app. Look, we've said this on the show countless times. We will say that this on this show, on any show, in public, whatever, in private, I don't care. Censorship is bad. Just because you don't agree with an idea, just because you don't agree with a company, just because you don't agree with a person, does not give you the right to say, no, you have no right to speak or share your ideas. I think it unfortunately is as black and white as that. However, we try to gray up these areas and justify it. I like to say, this is just the ego making an excuse, but this is a dangerous, slippery slope. It started, I would argue it started long before Donald Trump. But I think Trump was the first instance of it really being publicized in the way that it has and polarized in such a way. And now it's on an almost weekly basis, monthly. I wouldn't be surprised if it is on a daily basis, but we just don't get to hear it enough. Chris, I don't know what your thoughts are on this news or sort of where your head is at with that.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a Bitcoiner that's in the Brazil area, or he lives in Brazil. And I was kind of asking him, I was very confused by this because I know the president was kind of against mandating anything. I'll try not to get us canceled here. So he was against mandating the thing that a lot of countries were trying to mandate around the world. And so while he was against mandating it, I asked him, I was like, I'm very confused. Like, why are they mandating that you can't use Telegram? I just thought it was very interesting. And he's like, yeah, the president is very contrarian to that, but their equivalent of the Supreme Court actually made this ruling. So it wasn't him. And I guess that they would be a more liberal leaning or court that was just trying to censor speech. So this wasn't like an edict or I guess like an executive order from the president. This was something that the courts decided to rule on. I didn't have a chance to really dig into why they were doing it, but it's definitely kind of goes with what Q is saying. It's kind of censoring speech. And, it's a shame because we have another way of communicating through Telegram. But he said himself, he's like, I'm in a lot of Telegram groups, and it's like, what do I do now? Do I keep using it and risk being punished? Or do I just delete the app and just call it a day? So it's very interesting. It's very sad. I mean, it's sad globally. I know Brazil is not a country I've ever been to, but I do have friends that are Brazilian, and it's a real bummer. That's the only way to say it. Q, if there's anything you want to expand on that.
No, I think you hit that on the nail. I think we're still trying to really piece together what their rationale or reason is. And even when they make some sort of public announcement of, well, Telegram does this or whatever their BS reason is, that's what they're going to say. They're just going to say or have a tagline that they'll all align with, but the real reason is frankly unlikely to really be uncovered in the public's eyes. We will stay close to this story as it affects some of our own colleagues. And as with our updates, we'll continue to update you guys sporadically. But it's just something I think that needs to be brought to our attention because so many of us are operating on Telegram. I mean, God knows how many Telegram chats that I'm in, let alone like I'm not going to dox him. I don't want to bring names up, but like one of our own colleagues is repeatedly using it. Like this is how he operates, how he does his business. I I hope this is remedied very quickly. But I do want to flip gears, move us a little bit further north, and more specifically to address some of these rumors. Now, I want to start for those of you who did not get a chance last week. We had Samson Mao join us a week ago today. If you didn't get a chance to check out that episode, I highly recommend a wonderful conversation that we had with him. And then just a couple of days later, the man is posting about Guatemalan coffee, how much he loves it, going all around South America and Central America. And next thing you know, you hear Honduras is getting a little butthurt over the fact that Samson Mao is posting some Guatemalan coffee. Next thing you know, the rumor mills continue to spur and spiral. And I feel like I'm Shams or freaking Woj right now. But the latest rumor coming out of Central America is that it's Honduras, not Guatemala, but Honduras is potentially going to be introducing legislation to make Bitcoin legal tender in the coming days. This is just one of the countries we're going to be touching on, but I want to start there. Chris, initial thoughts on I'm going to confirm this actually really quickly, but I believe Honduras shares a border with El Salvador. But another Central American country jumping on board with the Bitcoin legal tender narrative.
Gradually then suddenly, Q. That's all I got to say. First, Bitcoin was just for nerdy cypherpunks or privacy advocates. Then it's kind of like retail starting to get involved. Then institutional buyers, then nation states. Oh, it's just a small country. Then it's going to be just a big country if Mexico adopts it. And then we're just seeing game theory play out. I mean, it's pretty incredible that Bitcoiners, even earlier than Q and myself, were calling this long before us. I was not a believer in Bitcoin back in 2017. Obviously, I've been orange pilled and turned around to the light side. But yeah, no, I mean, they were calling this way before I did. And it's pretty incredible to see their things come to fruition. So Q, anything else you want to add on that?
I mean, yes, El Salvador and Honduras share a border. My seventh grade geography skills, I've still got them. Like even if it's both Honduras and Guatemala, you literally now have three countries that are all one next to each other, and you start to expand the trade capabilities between them. Before we dive into the next story, because it is relevant to sort of what we're discussing here, we talk about a lot on the show. The countries that are going to be the earlier adopters, the ones that are going to go for Bitcoin first, sooner, are the ones that have not benefited from the fiat regime and system that we've been living in. They're the ones that the U.S. sort of boxes out of all the trade deals. They're the ones that the U.S. sort of gives crumbs to when and if they need it, rather than just helping them prosper and grow. And this is a wonderful opportunity for these countries to, I think, capitalize on what Bitcoin can offer. However, just because the government buys into it, there has to be buy-in from the citizens as well. We questioned Samson a little bit last week on, what about those in El Salvador who are not on board with the Bitcoin legal tender push? And his comments were along the lines of, hey, if you actually zoom out, like they're making the pictures look like this crowd is much bigger than it is. It's not as many people as that you're made to believe. Um, Bloomberg, however, came out with a story over the weekend where they essentially said, I mean, the headline was very clickbaity. Where is it? I had it up. I had it up. El Salvador businesses are not using Bitcoin as much as barely bother with Bitcoin. A study finds out of Bloomberg, and whether the accuracy of this is true or false, or however much the information is getting fudged, I do think it's worthy to note that just because the country adopts it doesn't mean that the people there have adopted it, and vice versa. I feel like at this point, and I'm trying to pull up numbers live as I'm going on this rant and ramble, the adoption rate in the US, as far as how many open wallets, how many people use it percentage wise of the population, on a daily active users basis, is higher than that in El Salvador, even though that El Salvador has Bitcoin as legal tender. I am trying to look this up, so I'm going to stop talking for a second while Chris goes ahead and comments on my ramble.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people, even I think Jeff Ross brought this up, and we'll have him on later on the show, like you brought up. But I guess the thing that's incredible with Bitcoin is not just the price. I think that's actually one of the last indicators. Obviously, as the price goes up, that indicates more use. But I know even Nico from Simply Bitcoin brings this up as well, that we're watching the hash rate hit all-time highs after just last summer, not even 9 months ago, China banned mining, and we watched as like 40% of the hash rate go down, and we saw a difficulty adjustment of 28% occur. And it's incredible. Imagine saying that a company fired 40% of its workers, and then all of a sudden, without any interruption, it kept working. No problems, no supply chain issues, no delays on shipping. Imagine if Amazon, perfect example, Amazon, they have, I think, well over 1.2 million workers globally. But imagine 40% of Amazon staff were to get like laid off, or something were to occur tomorrow that they had to quit. And then you still get your package in 2 days as a Prime member, or still get your package in 5 days if you order it. No interruptions to anything. Like, think about how truly incredible it is. Imagine like 40% of Google staff quit. Imagine 40% of Facebook. Maybe they're bad examples because a lot of the work is done but through servers, and like the code might not break and stuff. But just think about Amazon from a logistics perspective. That's what you can think of the Bitcoin network as. It's moving digital scarce value across the internet without any hindrance of anything going on. So it's truly incredible. Obviously, we're seeing the number of wallets increase in size as well as the hash rate continue to hit all-time highs. We've had a couple slight difficulty adjustments go down, but it's still very high compared to what it was. And it was still higher than when China banned mining. So I think a lot of people are just dealing with issues of trying to find spots to plug in these ASIC miners. I know people from my buddies who do mine say that finding rack space or various electrical components for plugging them in is very difficult right now. Q, anything else you want to go with the numbers now?
No, I don't think the numbers align as well as I thought they did. This Forbes article is not being my friend right now, so I'm going to stand by my article, my bold claims without numbers backing them up. I do, however, want to maybe ask you what your thoughts are on, the government forcing upon the people Bitcoin if they're not necessarily on board with it.
Yeah, so my view is, Bitcoin was never meant to force anyone to do anything. So I'm kind of against a government forcing anyone. I know El Salvador has workarounds in there saying that if you don't want to hold Bitcoin, obviously you'd accept it as payment as legal tender, and then you can convert it to dollars immediately. I know some people are definitely worried, while Bitcoin's volatile, well, what about even at the event of the sale, all of a sudden Bitcoin's price drops within a few hours or an hour, it drops a lot. I just lost a bunch of money. I'm sure El Salvador is working out ways that you can instantly convert to US dollars or US dollars upon receival of the sale. I don't think we recommend that, but I guess that's always an option. I know Strike, you have the option when receiving Bitcoin as payment, or if someone's using the Strike app, I know that's very popular in El Salvador. If they convert it, they give you Bitcoin, they can give you US dollars. So it's very easy to do if you're using Strike. I'm not sure about Chivo, the wallet that El Salvador uses.
Yeah, I mean, based on what I'm reading on the Chivo about Chivo's rollout in El Salvador, one of the very interesting things is, like, for example, the cost of gas is Forbes is saying 20 cents per gallon cheaper. I can just tell you off the bat that that figure is probably incorrect because the only country in the world that denominates gas in gallons is America, and every other country does it in liters. So I don't trust what Forbes is really saying. I do see a world where El Salvador has incentivized people on different businesses. Hey, cut your costs down if people are paying in Bitcoin, whether we're going to pick it up or you just have to have the cost lower. I'm not going to speak to that, but I can definitely see a world where they're incentivizing users to do it as such. And this is a very interesting statistic. Again, grain of salt, because it's coming from this same Forbes article. There's two poorest quintiles, so like the two poorest essentially groupings of their income levels. Only 6% of them have bank accounts, whereas as a total right now, I believe it's 46% of all El Salvadorians have a Chivo wallet and therefore have received like the $30 Bitcoin from El Salvador. Banking the unbanked is going to be a huge problem in this next iteration of the global financial markets. And whether it's people opting to not be banked because they just don't see the benefits in it, or they're just not doing it because they've never had access before, that is going to be, I think, a huge hurdle to get over in the for the next generation, timeline wise, like 50 over the next 50 years. I would say this is going to be a serious issue in our hands. One other country that it is worth noting in this rumor mill is Malaysia. There's rumors that they also are introducing Bitcoin as legal tender. Look, I think we've all heard of Malaysia. I don't think very many of us can point to Malaysia on a map. Based or not based out of, but it is located in Asia, Southeast Asia, not too far from Thailand. Very small country, but we do trade with them on a very high basis. There are a lot of exports out of Malaysia that come to the US, but at the same time, this is not, again, this is another example of countries that have not necessarily benefited from our fiat system being one or two steps removed. Malaysia tends to have a lot of their products shipped over to China and India. And then as a result, manufacturing happens there. And then it comes over to the US, or even they'll send it to Vietnam. So Malaysia is kind of just sat on the sidelines, like giving the West everything they wanted without reaping the rewards. Another example, I think, of a country that's been turned off by the fiat system and is looking for benefits to it. Chris, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, Q, basically the legacy financial system not helping other countries. I think this is a point that someone reiterated to me, and I know we were coming on 2 years of the pandemic, right when the US issued stimulus checks. While Q and I are American citizens and we live in the United States, we were able to benefit from those stimulus checks. El Salvador didn't get a bailout. Any country that's dollarized didn't get a bailout. Like, they didn't get stimulus checks. So while we're seeing inflation now here in the United States, inflation was hitting them much earlier because things were getting more expensive, because more helicopter money, as they call it, was just being distributed to us Americans, and we're able to buy cheap goods. But those cheap goods hurt foreign economies. So yeah, while Q and I were able to benefit from those, and definitely if you put the $1,200 stimulus check into Bitcoin, you're doing quite well. I know that there's a Twitter account that's what's my stimulus worth now in Bitcoin, and it tweets every day what the price difference from the price that you bought at the day of, like, I think April 15th is the day they just assumed that you got your stimulus check of 2020 to what it is now. And I know it's up multiple folds in terms of when you bought. I think it was assuming you bought it like $7,000 or something like that. So I mean, we're at 39,000. So just do the quick math on that alone. You're up like 5 or 6 times at least.
I'm so mad that I didn't put the entire amount in Bitcoin, but hey, I still put some of it in. One last thing out of international news, but I think it's more of a not nice story, but a grifting story, if you will. A member of parliament out of St. Martin's has announced very loudly and publicly, and for whatever reason, proudly, no, not that proud, but he is going to take his entire salary, not in Bitcoin, not in Ethereum, not in Doge. Shit, I would honestly at this point have accepted Solana, but no, he's taking it in Bitcoin Cash. Yeah, He is not pushing forward legislation. He is not pushing forward legalization, legal tender, none of that. This is purely an individual decided to take his salary in Bitcoin Cash. You're allowed to do whatever the hell you want. But I we don't have this image, but I'll post it on my Twitter later. So make sure you give me a follow, Q underscore like the letter. The video, I'm gonna say it like this. I'm gonna say it like this with reason. When you have the founder of something over you while you're signing a document that essentially benefits what he has been doing, I don't know if that was on your own accord or not. All I'm saying is that just felt very sus. It would have been very different if that was being done, without the presence of the founder of Bitcoin Cash, just hawkishly over the documents while you're signing it to make sure it's being signed, because you're finally getting legitimized after what, 7-8 years in the shadows. Maulers didn't do that with El Salvador. Satoshi Nakamoto hasn't done that at any point with Bitcoin. Samson Mao is not huddled over Bukele signing that into law. Why does, like, you are allowed to be paid however you want to be paid. You are allowed to operate however you want to be operated. That is, in my opinion, the freedom of the world. So long as you are not harming me, so long as you are not harming other people, you are fine and dandy. But like when you're being grifted and taken advantage of, I do think it's on the responsibility of those who are paying attention to at least like point it out. I can't go so far as to go down to St. Martin's and be like shake this man awake, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a little too dramatic about it. Maybe I care a little too much, but Chris, I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, so to your point, Q, like when the founder's right there, yeah, he can say, oh, I'm taking my salary in Bitcoin Cash, but I don't know the stipulations of the deal. I'm not saying Roger Ver is the founder of Bitcoin Cash, but we don't know if there was some backdoor dealing that we don't know about. Bitcoin Cash isn't a proof of stake network. It's a fork of Bitcoin. So it is still a proof of work protocol, but that means like Roger Ver has a lot of the supply. Obviously he was the one that created it and he was able to accumulate a lot of it. So with that being said, and Q, you're looking at me a little confused. He's able
to.
No.
No. I sorry to interrupt you. I'm confused because I didn't realize St. Martin's is technically still part of the Netherlands.
Oh, I didn't realize that either. But
right?
Yeah. So so St. Martin's, but nothing's to say that, oh, I'm taking my salary in this, but little do we know he's getting a side deal behind. I'm not saying that happened, but if you're the founder of something, obviously you want yours to get adopted and used worldwide. You're obviously competing against Bitcoin and all other cryptocurrencies. So, it's in your own best interest to start gifting leaders or company like CEOs in order to use these things. So that's just my two cents on it. Good for him if he's using it, but ultimately I'm not too worried about it. If Bitcoin's the more dominant network, Q and I don't use AIM anymore. They shut down AIM last December, rest in peace. We don't use Ask Jeeves anymore. We don't use MySpace anymore. So it just goes to show like the more powerful network dominate in the digital space. Q, if you want to add anything to that.
All I'm saying is if we never fucking believed Mark Zuckerberg and we all stuck to MySpace, our entire generation would be much better coders than what we are now. My 2 cents. Like Tom tried to lead us to the promised land and we kind of messed that one up. Just again, my 2 cents on that.
I saw a great tweet that was like, when I was working on MySpace and using MySpace, little did I realize when I stopped using it, I was leaving a 6-figure salary behind when you have to do all the coding, exactly to Q's point of like putting in songs, putting in pop-ups, putting in all these different things, simple HTML stuff. But for MySpace, it's basically, coding that would become now what is the internet.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm pretty sure Tom is also a big Bitcoiner, but maybe I'm just making that up. But I'd love to believe that he's also a Bitcoiner. Tom, if you're out there listening, always welcome to hop on and chat with us. I'm gonna slide in your DMs, just letting you know that, Tom. I know you're a viewer. You Biden and and Jerome Powell, always viewing Bitcoin Magazine live, and we appreciate the three of you guys. But moving on now, I want to talk some businesses, and there are a few different businesses I want to highlight. First, we're going to start with PayPal because fees are annoying, yet they are an important gauge on how I convince and orange pill certain friends. For example, shout out the homie Avid. On Friday, I finally convinced him to buy his first Bitcoin. How did I do that? I explained the cheapest place to buy Bitcoin, Strike. Shout out Jack Mahlers, who is listening. And then I doubled down by saying, hey, I'll either send you some Bitcoin, or if you just want to download this app, it'll take you 5 minutes to do it right here. You'll get $10 for free. You want to use that towards Bitcoin? Yeah, amazing. If not, whatever. Send it back to your own bank account and you can take your wife out for ice cream tonight and you're welcome. But he does it. Got him on Bitcoin. And honestly, I know he's joking about this, but I kind of love this joke. He is now fully committed to getting a whole Bitcoin because he never stops what he started and doesn't like leaving anything incomplete. So yay, your children will thank both of us, mainly me, their favorite Uncle Q, for getting their dad involved in Bitcoin. But how does he want to do it? By spending no money at all. And he legitimately wants to just do it by getting the $10 referral code every single time until he gets enough of them to buy a whole coin. So to that, I say the best of luck, good sir. However, there's another side of this that's important. It's the fees. And the fees was how I really convinced him to go there. When I showed him the fee on Cash App, when I showed him the fee on Coinbase, and then I showed him the fee on Venmo, explaining the difference on how Venmo and Robinhood, you're not really able to hold it yourself. And then PayPal turns around and does, the really annoying thing of hiking their fees up. And there's a really specific one that I want to highlight because I am one of these type of buyers. I buy a little bit every hour right now through Strike. However, if I were to do an hourly purchase at that denomination, my fee would be almost 50 cents, 49 cents. They categorize this 49-cent fee for any transactions between $1, so 49% of the transaction is a fee towards PayPal, all the way up to $4.99, so roughly a little less than 10%. That's more than you pay in taxes to go down to the store and buy a burger, even in Los Angeles. Like what is happening where these exchanges now are starting to ramp up their fees? Chris, I'd love your thoughts on, do we think the fee sort of game is going to be something that's played in the future? I know a conversation I had with Alex, he literally was like, dude, the fees today are going to be negligible. I had to hold back on a big buy on Cash App because I'm like, I don't want to I don't want to pay a $30 fee. I just didn't want to pay a $30 fee. I'm cheap as hell like that. But maybe I'm overthinking this.
No, I mean, Q, like I run an investing podcast on the side, and part of it is like your fees compound just as much as your investments do. So, I've talked about having a 1% or 2% fee of your portfolio that compounds, and you can miss hundreds of thousands of dollars out in the long run. I know Strike's the best for it. It's market to market. I think it's actually, there's 30 basis points for, buying at spot to the spread of the bid. So spread and ask. I don't get into too much details about that, but exactly to your point, the internet has, how do I say this? It's bringing everything, it's deflationary. So it's bringing everything to zero. So while Venmo is hiking up the rates, as much as 50 cents or, 49% of your purchase on a dollar, Strike's doing it for 30 basis points, which is 0.3% of a percent, basically, or 0.3% of a percent. So much cheaper by comparison. Even Swan, and even though I don't recommend Coinbase, it's much cheaper than that by comparison. There's, I guess, two reasons that I could see this. They must see a lot of traffic on Bitcoin that they're trying to generate more revenue, that they're hiking up these rates, and maybe that they're not able to meet the market to market of it, or it's just causing an overload of their system. So they're trying to, I don't want to say stifle incentives, but basically, like, if you're having too much problems with a part of your business, you can just keep raising your rates until you see demand drop. So I wonder if that's just something they're trying to do. I don't know if they're just trying to eke out, profits or revenue just to do that to people that are buying on their platform. But ultimately, they're going to have to capitulate and come down. I mean, you could do a simple Google search or just open up any of their apps, and you could see that they're way cheaper to use pretty much any other platform than PayPal and Venmo to do that right now.
Yeah, I literally have my Venmo open right now. I'm trying to, like, in real time see what it would cost me on just Venmo. No, you don't get my info. Honestly, yo, by the way, mini side tangential rant. I hate Venmo. I hate the fact that our generation got so hooked on Venmo that like that's the main way that we transact money. There's so many options now, and the headache to try and like track down $300 that was sent to me on Venmo took me 3 weeks to get access to my $300. That is my mini rant. Again, as always, Bitcoin solves exactly that. Literally in 10 minutes, every transaction is confirmed. I don't care what any credit card company says. I don't care what any peer-to-peer payment processor says. In 10 minutes, the money is in my account. Nothing is better than Bitcoin in that regard. I do want to now touch on what I think is some big news. We're not talking shit coins, but we are talking a stable coin, and it is valid for one reason and one reason only. Terra announced plans at the end of last week to buy $10 billion worth of Bitcoin to keep on their reserves to essentially back Terra with Bitcoin. They're essentially putting Terra on the Bitcoin standard. As of right now, they've purchased $3 billion worth of Bitcoin, and they have plans to finish out the last $7 billion. This is huge. I think this is huge. This could set a roadmap for different stablecoins to follow suit. This could validate Terra. I don't necessarily think this makes it layer 2 because Terra is built on its own blockchain, I believe. So it's not going to be a part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. However, it will be impacted, and as a result, where Bitcoin goes, Terra will go. And I think if that's the case, it's just up and to the right. But, that's also if you denominate things in the dollar. Chris, I'd love your thoughts first, just broadly on this Terra news.
I think it's huge. I think it was kind of overlooked. I know there was talks of it on our company Slack channel, and it's definitely something that's getting overlooked. Not that I'm advocating for this other token or stable coin. It is huge. They're trying to prove their proof of reserves. I know Tether is by far, I think, the biggest of any of the stable coins, and I know it's been called into question that it's getting fractionally reserved. I know that they've updated some of their terms multiple times, or their terms and conditions, and saying that it's not necessarily backed one-to-one dollar to Tether. They kind of loosened the language to say other assets. They were including other real estate, and I believe they said other cryptocurrencies. I don't know if that's all Bitcoin. Yeah, that's good for them. If it's other cryptocurrencies, they're putting a risk if those go to zero, that collapsing basically Tether in doing so. But I think this is huge news. I don't know what their long-term strategy is. If they're trying to get this to back or basically, back their currency, I don't know if they would try and pitch to become the CBDC. So I guess I'm cautiously optimistic. While it's cool that a company is buying a bunch of Bitcoin and putting it on their treasury reserves, it gives me cautionary tale with them being they basically offer another service in terms of stable coins. Q, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I definitely think I'm in the minority of this, but I fully believe that the central bank's plan to create a USDC is going to be just acquiring one of these stable coins. I also am aligning more and more with the belief or idea that because we have so many freaking old people in charge of our money, our policies, and every decision that gets made about our country, unfortunately, we're more likely to revert to a gold standard than a Bitcoin standard, which isn't necessarily the worst thing to start. I do think we need to make some sort of a shift in that regard. I have to say, firstly, why is like I'm trying to pull up Terra and Tether right now on Coinbase, and it's like annoyingly difficult. So for any Coinbase people who are watching right now, can you like fix the UI on your app because it's garbage? I obviously never use it, so I'm now literally live on there. I'm saying I'm switching over to Binance because Coinbase is impossible to use. But I think it's also valid because look, there was the scam last year where you had Tether. Oh, we have all the dollars, so it's a 1-to-1. And then lo and behold, no, they have zero backing it. It looks like an entire scam. And the reason I say that's a scam versus, oh, Bitcoin's a scam or a Ponzi scheme. If you outright say we are backed by something, you better have the money in the bank, literally. But they did not. I think that's part of the reason why it's being a little overlooked. If you read the actual verbiage of some of the words or the phrasing of these announcements that came out of Terra's camp, they did not say we have purchased. They said we had plans to purchase. Shout out our incredible writer Namcios for getting to the bottom of this and confirming that $3 billion worth of Bitcoin has been purchased by Terra, and they still have plans to buy the remaining 7. Um, it, I mean, it's interesting too because we talk about the stablecoin market as a way to avoid the volatility that you see in Bitcoin and the altcoin markets in general. However, do we not reintroduce that volatility by having Terra backed now by Bitcoin? Um, it'll be interesting to see, I think, where and what adoption now we see of Terra, because in my mind, I don't see any difference between Terra and Bitcoin if Terra is um, if Terra is backed by Bitcoin. I think that they become one and the same to those of us who are aware and paying attention of it, and it could create a very nice arbitrage trade. But that is just my sort of finance degree poking out a little bit without doing any due diligence. Where's that question now? Also, I do think it's worth to just sort of comment. We see a lot of news groundswelling about this. I don't think, though, that ultimately it will do anything beyond validate Bitcoin. It's not. This is not legalizing Terra. This is not pushing it forward into any sort of business. There's no legalization of it on a government level. This only validates it within its own sort of ecosystem to a degree. What I'd hate to see happen is, as a result of this, Bitcoin gets more validated to be clumped in with cryptos at large. There is a little bit of a risk with that. However, you can hopefully try to see a way to separate the two, Bitcoin, Terra, and then the crypto markets at large. I don't know, Chris, if you have any thoughts on, again, just the ongoing debate of Bitcoin, crypto, and the fact that you have now a stable coin tying itself to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think, Bitcoin's the winner in the long run. And there was actually someone asking, why are we Bitcoin over anything else? So I'll run through some quick ones, and then Q, definitely hop on or add to anything that I miss. It's the most decentralized asset in the world. I guess aside from real estate, more geographically everywhere. But
I disagree with the real estate claim because of eminent domain. Any country can just go ahead and seize your real estate.
That's true.
With Bitcoin, they don't know who has it. So long as I've got my wallet and my seed phrase, that's mine.
Yeah, so I guess maybe not. Real estate's more decentralized in that sense, but not censorship resistant in that regard. So I guess that was the next thing. So it is the most censorship resistant asset. It has the best uptime of any internet protocol in the history of the internet, basically. More than Facebook, Google, Amazon, you name it, anything else, it has the best uptime in the world. There was a brief history in its very, very brief period in the beginning where it did go down very briefly, but better than any other cryptocurrency, better than other asset out there. Aside from just starting something right now that has 100% uptime, it's the best of anything in the world. It's by far the best performing asset of the last 13 years. A lot of other cryptocurrencies they say they're decentralized, but even like all these other ones, they claim that they're decentralized, but they're not. It's run by a foundation, or it has a developer or owner that we know who they are. It is the most decentralized and it can't be stopped. I know some people, it's very hard to wrap their mind around that, but that's the truth in the way that the protocol works. There's hundreds of thousands of miners around the globe that are protecting this protocol. And then there are also tens of thousands of nodes operating all across the world, verifying that those miners are not being malicious in what they do. Q, if there's anything else you want to add there.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there is no example of a better decentralized protocol, and due in large part because Satoshi Nakamoto said, peace out. Force pushed an update that essentially gave the nodes the right, once a 50% or 50.1% consensus was agreed upon, to have any changes made in the future. That allowed the Bitcoin protocol itself to be the most decentralized protocol. However, we introduce points of failure as we increase the UI. Every single time you and I are more easily able to interact with Bitcoin, it makes it less decentralized because you have new points of failure. The exchanges are a point of failure. Your wallets are a point of failure. Your internet provider becomes a point of failure. As we increase that access, you give off some of that decentralization so that Joe Schmoes and basic people and plebs like you, me, and shout out my boy Andrew Barksdale watching right now, that so that we can access it more easily. Because I'm not a cypherpunk, Chris. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not either.
No, I'm not.
And we watched this happen over the last month with all the different exchanges getting told by governments ranging from Canada to the US to Russia and Ukraine, asking them to shut off different wallet addresses based on where they're located. God forbid you are a US citizen with a VPN routing you through Russia or Ukraine for your Bitcoin wallet. Like you could very well have been shut down if you were using Coinbase for even a single buy. Like it is going to be, I think, on the founders and more specifically, I think on the maxis who have been in Bitcoin for 10 plus years now to highlight and expose, I think, hey, this protocol is only decentralized so long as we continue to operate under that guise. But as we introduce more things, there are more points of failure. That's why there was such a big outcry against the way Arculus handles their wallets. That's why there's such a big outcry over the way Coinbase just operates in general. It remains to be seen. I think this is an incredible first step. Does this mean, tomorrow we're going to get DAOs and NFTs in Bitcoin? No, not even close. I know there's always been pushes for NFTs to get introduced into the Bitcoin space. I fully believe that the technology behind it is great. I stand by that. I also, however, believe NFTs today are just a giant scam. But that is, again, my 2 cents on it. And I'm sure a lot of people in this echo chamber agree with that to a degree. But we'll say it all the time. All press is good press. And this is inherently good for Bitcoin at the end. And that's what we want. We want Bitcoin to succeed. I don't care if any of these other tokens or technologies really pan out, at least through the sense of US dollar value pan out. My second point on this, Chris, and I'd love your thoughts. How does this change if Terra is backed by Bitcoin, if the world is on a global Bitcoin standard? Does that give Terra such a leg up in the whole game theory of it all? Because they are the first stablecoin to have adopted a Bitcoin legal tender or Bitcoin standard. Or does it become a moot point and does Terra just become like almost like a Bitcoin ETF just trading in a stablecoin market?
I think it would just become a Bitcoin like ETF in that regard. Actually, that's not even right, though. It definitely makes them one of the more valuable companies by keeping all this on their treasury. I don't know if they're planning on basically fractionally reserving Bitcoin by basically selling the Terra on top and holding the Bitcoin beneath it. Then you're kind of running into the same issues that basically what ran into issues of how we failed the fiat currency mentality. We kept saying, oh, gold, backs these dollars. And then we kept adjusting the money multiplier on it until ultimately in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard completely. So they were adjusting the money multiplier. France basically called their bluff. We had to pay them. And then England was sending ships to one of our forks and trying to claim the gold. And in that moment, that's when Nixon said, we're coming off the gold standard. We're still backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, but basically that doesn't mean anything. And that's kind of what we've seen play out over these last 51 years now. Currencies or fiat currencies in particularly only last anywhere from a few years to I think like 50 years is probably the end of most of them. And we're watching it play out in real time right now, all the craziness that's going on in the world. Anything you want to add to that, Q?
Honestly, I wonder where all of the gold has been for the last 50 years. Like, did Nixon just bury himself with all of it eventually? Or like, is there just like a sunken ship somewhere in the Atlantic with because like genuinely, like where did that gold just go? It doesn't just disappear. It doesn't melt away. It doesn't disintegrate. Like that's what makes gold so valuable is that it lasts so long. It should be as easy as reversing the decision because the gold has just been sitting there safely, protected by the greatest military in the world. I want that answer.
Yeah, who's to say if the vaults are empty or not? But definitely, they've debased the currency relative to the amount of gold that they hold. I mean, we're just looking at Russia and China. They've been stockpiling gold for a few decades at least. Russia, in particular, has, I think they believe, have more gold than the United States as it is. I know a lot of the gold bugs say if they repeg it back to gold, then obviously Russia becomes the richest country in the world, I guess, technically by that metric. But that doesn't mean anything. I mean, we still build fiat currencies on top of it, and Bitcoin kind of runs synonymous or adjacent to gold or to the fiat currency. I know Greg Foss, he's a longtime bond trader that we've had on the show before, a Canadian, and he was saying he doesn't hope the system collapses. He's got three younger kids, and he hopes that he always says the boomers are very greedy, and we took advantage of it, and we really screwed over the millennials, the Zoomer generation, and the generation below them. So he says he hopes that like your cash or your fiat can be in a checking account and Bitcoin's your savings account. And that's something that he keeps hammering home. This is to try and do the soft landing or the beautiful deleveraging, as Ray Dalio has coined before. I know Q and I probably see different than Mr. Dalio. I think things are just getting more and more crazy. More and more money printing is required. They're trying to raise interest rates, but at the mercy of defaulting on their debt, it's very, very tough to do. Q, is there anything else that you want to add to that of Greg Foss or Ray Dalio talking about those things?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big believer that in our lifetime we will never see the dollar go away. I don't think in our lifetime, maybe when like I am Biden's age, if I live that long, maybe I genuinely don't see the dollar. And that's why I want to collect like one freshly minted $1 through $100 bill as like bookmarks for all of my books. And I'll show my children like, yeah, this was how I paid for things at one point in my life. Like this was the only way to do it. Um, we can sit here and try to predict the future as much as we want. There are a million and one scenarios that could just pan out tomorrow. It will be very interesting. I think the key things to be paying attention to over the course of the next 12 months in particular will be what countries adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, what businesses accept Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, as a payment, and what territories they operate in. McDonald's, Starbucks, Pizza Hut, they all accept Bitcoin in El Salvador. They all do it, but they only do it because it's supposed to be accepted in El Salvador. What happens when a company like Amazon turns around and says, hey, you want to buy whatever the thing on in your Amazon card is? Well, we'll accept Bitcoin. We're linked with Strike. Go ahead and pay us through Bitcoin through Strike and you're good. That changes the game. Something like that, absolutely. What happens if one of the major countries, one of the big global players, I'll still include Russia in this. I still think Russia is a very, very likely candidate to have some sort of Bitcoin adoption announced. They've been buying up gold incessantly for the last 10 years. Maybe that's where all our gold went, as we were slowly just selling it to Putin, not realizing what we're doing. But that's a very valid reality.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show like all fiat currencies go to zero eventually, and that's not anecdotal. That's the truth. That's the true when you look over history. All fiat currencies go to zero eventually because basically they start debasing it, whether it's the Romans, whether it's the Greeks, whether it's the United States, whether it's Britain, whether it's any of these currencies. Some of them have longer lives than others. Some can last a couple hundreds of years when they're backed by gold or a commodity or something like that. But eventually they all go to zero because greed overtakes them. It just takes one bad leader or one bad regime or one bad dictator, and they want more power and more control in that set of circumstances. And you can get away with it for a number of years. I mean, many of the people that have debased it are no longer alive. They started doing it and then they're like, oh, well, my dad did it, or, the generation before me did it, so I'm going to do it. And then, it slowly unravels. We even saw in the Romans, they talked about clipping of coins. So, there was I think it was called the denarius. I may be conflating the two, but I believe the denarius was a long time golden coin that allowed for people to basically, it was a well accepted medium of exchange across a lot of the continents in Europe and eventually the globe. And over time, people started to shave off pieces of it and save these shavings or gold dust, and then kind of melt it down and make a new coin. And then over time, you saw that they became warped. And then governments started to clip the edges so that the ridges on the coins, and that was basically them giving you less and less value for claiming that it's the same amount of value. And that happens, time and time again in history. Ours is with just paper money that they can print as much as they want with no repercussions. So it's even easier than clipping gold or silver or what any other thing in the history, basically. Q, go ahead.
The one thing that will always reign true, one Bitcoin is equal to one Bitcoin. Thankful for that. I do want to highlight one last piece of news out of America. I know I'm just going to say up front, I'm not a fan of this. You guys hear me all the time talk about the legalized casino that is the stock market. Goldman Sachs, though, I guess, figured out a way to do an over-the-counter crypto trade by introducing a Bitcoin-linked instrument called a non-deliverable option with crypto merchant bank Galaxy Digital, essentially operating as a form of an options trade on the Bitcoin market. Look, I understand the validity of introducing Bitcoin to these public markets so that the billions, if not trillions of dollars that are tied up in different IRAs and 401ks can have access and get exposed to Bitcoin so that a generation of people can benefit from it, i.e. people, in my opinion, who are over the age of 40, who really are going to be able to capitalize on that. If you're under 40 and you have $1 million in your 401k or IRA, like, good for you, man. You did something right. Feel free to slide into my DMs and tell me what I'm doing wrong. However, at the same time, it's not as necessary as we want to think. If you introduce all these different variations of Bitcoin before just offering a Bitcoin ETF, before offering it as a commodity akin to gold, precious metals, for Christ's sake, I mean, you have nickel and wheat going through the roof, oil going through the roof right now. Bitcoin is doing the same. It's not up thousands of percent at a time over the course of a week, but it's up hundreds of thousands of percent over the course of its life. For lack of a better ETF right now, MicroStrategy operates as that, but Goldman Sachs instead is turning around and figuring out how to options trade on Bitcoin. I'm not necessarily a fan of this. In fact, I'm like so against this, and I think this actually hurts Bitcoin. However, I will always stand by all press is good press. And if you have Goldman Sachs now invested in figuring out as many ways as possible to get their clients exposed to Bitcoin so that that money can be put towards Bitcoin in the public markets, what happens to Bitcoin's price when demand goes up? Thank you, Econ 101. I don't know, Chris. I know you're getting things ready for our guests right now, but I'd love to see some people's thoughts in the chats over in YouTube, Twitch, or even over on Rumble. What you guys are thinking about the fact that Bitcoin entering these public markets, what that does in the short and long term for Bitcoin. We're going to be joined by a lot of different guests talking about exactly this, as well as the inflation stuff. Feel free to throw some questions in the chats as well, and we'll try to populate and circulate them. In the meantime, though, guys, you know the drill. Use code YTMAG, get 10% off of your Bitcoin 22 tickets. We're going to be partying it up in Miami. You're not going to want to miss this. I mean, I spent a lot of time this weekend planning out some really fun stuff that we're going to do both live down there, and also we're going to have a really interesting and awesome stream. For those of you who didn't attend last year and were only able to catch it online, that stream was, lack of a better word, janky. We just sort of press play on a camera and let you guys watch what's going on. This time it's going to be a lot different. It's going to be a lot more fun, but you're going to want to be there in person live when people like Jordan Peterson speak, when people like Peter Thiel are talking, Jack Mallers is making yet another keynote speech, and the president of El Salvador himself was going to be in Miami, and he has a very special announcement. My money's on Turkey. I think if I had a sports book right now and I was betting what's the next country that Bitcoin is going to make legal tender versus what's the country that Bukele is going to announce. Every single South American country just got downgraded after these Honduras rumors and Samson Mao hanging out, drinking some Guatemalan coffee. But people are still really quiet and sleeping on Turkey. You're talking about a country that has 52% inflation in just 1 year. 52%. That's insane. So I am a betting man, as my college basketball weekend will prove. And if I'm putting money, I am still a believer in Turkey adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, and I still believe that Bukele is going to announce some other countries' news on behalf of them at Bitcoin 22. So use code YTMAG, get 10% off. And you know what? If you want some swag, go to the Bitcoin Magazine store. You get 21% off with the same code. We also have released 2 books. Last week, we talked to Alan Farrington, who wrote Bitcoin is Venice. And on Thursday, we're going to be joined by Alex Gladstein, who wrote Check Your Financial Privilege. Both of those are also available in the Bitcoin Magazine store. So use code YTMAG, get 10% off your conference tickets, 21% off of your store goodies. We'll be back after a short commercial break, and we'll be joined by the team over at Not Coin Stories.
Simply Bitcoin.
Thank you, Chris. We'll be back shortly, guys. Stick around. What is up, guys? Thank you for sticking around. It is still me, still coming from my mom's basement, but we are joined now by our special guest today, Nico. Nico, thank you so much for joining us over from the Simply Bitcoin team.
What's up, man? Happy to be here. I think I just saw Coin Icarus join, also known as Phil.
We're excited. There he is.
Hello, I'm super sorry.
No need to apologize. We heard about the rumblings. We are live right now, just as a heads up. But we did hear, unfortunately, about the computer glitches and issues. Hopefully, for your guys' show, you're able to get that sorted out.
I appreciate that.
It's Murphy's Law, right? You guys know because you guys have been making content. So,
oh yeah,
all the bugs, the Zoom bugs. Oh man. memories.
Nothing is more stressful, I think, and Chris will be the one to really attest to this because I've never seen that man so scared, stressed in one moment in his life in the short time we've worked together. But this time when YouTube kicked us off and deplatformed us, he genuinely thought he did something wrong or pressed the wrong button. But like honestly, we can start there because I wouldn't hate talking about this. So thank you to I want to give you credit in the chats for bringing it to our attention. Rand Moore, thank you for bringing it up. Telegram, as of yesterday, Brazil's Supreme Court did reverse the decision to ban Telegram in the country. 20,000 per day fine was levied if you were using the app. I mean, look, censorship ultimately is bad. Just telling people to not have an idea, not think things through, believe what you believe them to believe what you want them to believe. I view it no different as burning books, especially in today's day and age where like I force myself to buy books because I'm like a crazy person who like I want to feel the tree dead between my hands. I'm like that, I guess. But like most of us are reading it on our phones, on a tablet. Like Phil, you're joining us literally on a tablet. How much do you read on that versus like 50 years ago? How much of that was going to be on paper?
So ironically enough, I'm actually joining from my phone, and Nico knows I suck at using my tablet. Okay, he got me to get an iPad. I got like all the features, and I never use this thing. I'm actually charging it right now. It hasn't worked in months. But anyways, to your point though, okay, I would say that I listen to I'd say 90% of the books now that I quote unquote read. But also to your other point about having the quote unquote the dead trees. I think that there's something really, it's not just nostalgic, but there's something really important about printed books. Because to me, anyways, digital, when something is digital, technically, right, it can be changed. It can be changed at any time. And I mean, who's to say, who's the wiser? But when it's printed, you can actually, you can see the different editions, you can see the changes that they've made, and you can actually take a look at the quote unquote original text. So I think that there's something to be said for printed books. Oh, you're muted.
I love that. You're absolutely right. I think the other angle and lens of this, though, especially is in the digital age, to block just a page from being created or to block text from being shared. It's akin to burning a book at this point in time. I don't know if you guys feel the same or if I'm just being hyperbolic right now.
Yeah, I think look, I think that most of human history, that's always been the case. I think that America itself is an abnormality, and I think that like a specific events needed to happen for America to be the way it was and for the First Amendment to be freedom of speech, right? That's an abnormality. That doesn't happen in history. So I think what we're seeing right now is because the conversation has moved to the digital public square, and apparently, there's obviously it's politically contentious. It's a politically contentious issue. Certain companies they see that it's beneficial to them and their ideology and their goals to censor certain speech. But I think that's been the historical norm throughout history. I think it's really an abnormality what is happening right now, and I think that's why something like Bitcoin is so important, right? The censorship resistant properties of it, right? We have examples of Afghanistan, we have examples of Cuba, we have examples of Venezuela, we have examples of Ukraine, we have examples of Russia, of whole swaths of people getting completely like, okay, one thing is communication, but those people in those countries, those unfortunate people, are completely cut out of the financial system. Like they can't even use it at all, right? So I think Bitcoin is going to usher in this age of, or this mental idea, the fact that no human being should have the right to censor another human being's speech, period. And speech includes your ability to transact with somebody else, right? And one more thing, I know, shout out to Start9 guys, right? The Bitcoin node, right? It's a dedicated computer. It's always plugged in. It's always wired, right? If you somehow combine that with a router, all of a sudden, or like a router or like a personal server, all of a sudden you have peer-to-peer, right? You have a peer-to-peer, server-to-server type of communication setup. So I think Bitcoin could be the Trojan horse to a peer-to-peer internet rather than what we have today, other than Bitcoin, of course, which is if you don't run if you run your own node, but you kind of have this system where it's like communications go from me to a server to the other person, and I think that is just, it just gives a very few amount of people tremendous amount of power to get to dictate what is good speech, what is bad speech.
Yeah, and Nico, I think that's a perfect point. I think, one of the first lines in the Bitcoin white paper is peer-to-peer digital cash. And I know, I guess people don't realize it. I think now we're kind of seeing it in real time play out, that the benefit of being peer-to-peer, right now we've had governments, whether it's Canada or governments around the world, trying to pressure Putin and the Russian people, basically preventing them from transacting. And it's a real shame, to be honest. But Bitcoin, like exactly that you denoted, it's server to server or peer to peer. I can send you value or Q or fill value without being stopped. I mean, and even it goes to show, like Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, one of he's a cryptocurrency exchange, but he's a Bitcoiner by right. I know him. And he was saying that, if a government pressures them to censor transactions to do something, he basically said, like, take your Bitcoin off exchanges so I can't do anything against you. He would be under law if a judge or a president or something like that says he has to do it. He has to abide by federal laws. Otherwise, him and his company could be shut down. He could be jailed or whatever it may be. Go ahead.
I think that's the absolutely the Jesse Powell, and I think it was Brian Armstrong, right, as well. I mean, Brian kind of, he was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Jesse was really the one that doubled down. But what was interesting is the reaction from the Canadian government, right? They demonized the guy. They said it was like a breach of national security. So how scary is that, right? The fact that whole swaths of people could just be othered, right? Completely disconnected from the financial system, which is their ability to buy food, all of that, just because of their political beliefs. We've heard that happen in other countries. We've just never heard that happen in the West. And I think that really highlights the momentum of where this centralized money is heading, right? Central bank digital currencies is the nightmare, right? But we're already kind of seeing that censorship already. And I say this all the time to Phil, I would not be surprised that in 5-10 years, right, you buy a certain good or you drive a little bit too far, deduct automatic $200 from your bank account. That isn't some dystopian nightmare. That's already happening in China, right? And so this is really scary stuff. And this is why Bitcoin is so important. And people don't realize how high the stakes are. We have a future where we have two futures. We have a future of freedom, which is Bitcoin, and we have a future of central bank digital currencies. And you're not going to be able to straddle a line. You're going to have to pick which one you want to, which side you want to decide to be on, right? So I think that's like the fight for our time, specifically, for our generation, right? It's a battle of freedom, and fortunately for us, though, it's not, a kinetic war that our ancestors had to fight with, like no one's getting shot, fortunately, right? But it is still kind of a war, without a doubt. It's a war of narratives.
I'm a little curious too, because we are starting to see, I think, two different sides. You have places like Kraken saying, no, absolutely not, get your coins out, trying to help people. And then you have other companies like Brian Armstrong, Coinbase, who will do an entire 180 within 72 hours. Curious if, the values of Bitcoin need to be, I think, implemented into these businesses when they're started, i.e. the decentralized aspect of it, or if there's just no real solution. And as we introduce these different products and offerings, we're going to have to give up some of this decentralization.
So I think Coinbase is completely compromised because they put their bets on shitcoins, and because shitcoins are inherently centralized, I think that they need the state to survive, right? It's not just me speculating that. It's not a coincidence that the World Economic Forum, right, supports projects like Ethereum. Literally, Phil discovered it, right? Or Mia Miyaguchi is on the Ethereum Foundation, and she sits on the World Economic Forum, and then the World Economic Forum directly attacks something like Bitcoin, right? That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that, and think about it from Coinbase's incentives, right? They're not incentivized to implement Lightning Network. They're incentivized to work with the government so that the government doesn't shut down a lot of the tokens that they're selling, like they did with XRP, right? So companies like Coinbase, it's like, I would even say they're enemies of Bitcoin. I would say Bitcoin only companies, just out of their incentives, it has nothing to do with how you structure the company. It's just you're incentivized to act a certain way. I trust more, right? I don't trust completely, but I trust more to do the right thing because they're just protecting their keep, right? It's not that I'm like, oh, I trust the people and whatever. No, they're acting they're following their incentives, right? So yeah, man, Coinbase is scary. And I suspect, and it was actually Corey Clipson that said this. I suspect that there's going to be like this evil alliance between shitcoins. Sorry, I don't know if I could altcoins.
Say whatever the fuck you want.
Okay, awesome. We're the same on our show. So there's this evil alliance between shitcoins. There's going to be an evil alliance between shitcoins, the government, and the government's, because think about it. Where does the government's main power strive from? The ability to create money out of thin air. So in their, 5 stages of denial, right? Like in the, like, oh, no, I could still keep this somehow. I think that they might see shitcoins as their way out. Right? Because Ethereum, you could technically do that kind of stuff. But with Bitcoin, no. If you want to make more Bitcoin, you have to get in line like everybody else, buy a miner, get some electricity. So it's going to be very interesting to play out how this plays out. And it's going to be a hell of a fight because at the end of the day, this is about power. This is about power and money. This is what politics is all about, right? So, oh man, strap in.
Well, I'm kind of curious then. Is this, in your guys' thoughts, do we in our lifetime see the US dollar completely eliminated then? Or do you see like a world where Bitcoin and fiat operates together, at least for an intermediary transitionary period?
Yeah, I definitely don't see I don't see the US dollar going away anytime soon. I mean, people should recognize that the majority of the world's debt is denominated in USD. Look, as much as we want to think that flipping a switch is just going to change that overnight, it doesn't. Okay, this process is most likely going to be extremely difficult. And you know what? Nico's messaging me and fucking me up here. Okay, no, I'm kidding. Anyways, so look, I think that it's going to be long and drawn out. I think that we're going to have this kind of like this scales thing happening, right? Like we ease into it. There's going to be some really rough patches because look, let's face it. How many financial systems have we dismantled, right? Like, let's be honest, as we've seen throughout history, none of them have been clean, right? Like nobody just wakes up the next day and boom, the new financial system's just working and everybody's just, that's just not how it works. So I think there's going to be a lot of struggle. I think that the narrative, the toxic narratives against proof of work, okay, because people, for some reason, the corporate-owned media considers proof of work itself to be toxic and evil. But we as Bitcoiners consider the complete opposite, that it is going to be the foundation for future innovation to come. And I just think that these kind of toxic anti-proof of work narratives, they are not going to stop. They are going to get louder as the system, as the current central bankers continue to realize that Bitcoin makes them look like fools every time they say anything without actually having to do anything, just by simply being. So you know what? This is going to get very frustrating for them.
Yeah, definitely. I'm giving a shout out to all of our platforms. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, Rumble, all those different things. But going along with Phil's point, I think things are only going to get worse before they get better. I know many Bitcoiners see that. Did you guys see, I believe you guys had it on your show recently, the Bloomberg opinion saying if you make less than 300K a year, stop feeding your animals, stop getting them chemo treatments, take a bus, sell your car, live on lentils, the list goes on and on. So kicking it back over to Nico and Phil, the gaslighting that's occurring, and it's only getting worse. I think the thing that makes it even worse is that they'll never admit they're part of the problem. And whether they're part of it indirectly or directly, they're never going to say, oh, the money printing is causing the problems. No, it's Bitcoiners and their energy wastage. That's causing the price hikes. No, it's Putin and causing the gas hikes. No, it's, X, Y, and Z corporation because they're being greedy and charging their customers too much. It's never like they never look internal. And I think with Bitcoin, they allow you to do that. If I send Bitcoin to a wrong address, and that's on me, I messed up, I lost the value, or the person I was trying to send to lost the value. It's very onerous and it's independent, and you have to do well yourself. So Nico or Phil, if you want to kick off anything to bring that up, yeah.
So Phil pointed something out, and I couldn't unsee it. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And he was like, "This is class warfare." And I said that, but he pointed out, he's like, "Look, they're trying to blame and whatever." And that's exactly what the article did, right? The article, instead of saying, lower and middle class America, most of America doesn't make 300K, is getting hurt by inflation. No. They have to say, hey, for people that are making 300K a year, they're not getting hurt by inflation. It's everybody else. It's the others. It's the peasants. It's the plebs.
You're fine though if you make 250K.
You're fine if you make 250K. True. So and when Phil pointed it out, I'm like, this is Marxism class 101, right? This is literally divide and conquer, right? Blame the rich people, blame the corporations, blame whatever, blame what you said, right? Blame everybody but yourself, right? And look, at the end of the day, the fiat system, the incentives are so misaligned that it's like you're actually rewarded if you lie. You're actually rewarded if you cheat. If you convince the mob to buy into your idea, you're good, right? So it's like, do you really look, you could be moral, you could be ethical, right? But do you really blame certain people to exploit that system? I don't. I think it's just a bad architected system, right? So I think Bitcoin absolutely fixes this. However, look, if fiat and Bitcoin started at the same time, okay, Bitcoin would win, right? But the fiat system, which is what Phil was saying earlier, is so entrenched. They're so corrupt, right? They have their tentacles in so many facets of society because so many people are addicted to the power of the money printer, right? Which is fictitious, but they're addicted to that steady flow, right? So I'm really interested to see how it's going to play out, because I don't think that these people are going to give over the keys lightly. You hear the rhetoric from Powell, you hear the rhetoric from Yellen, you hear the rhetoric from Christine Lagarde. It's all Bitcoin's money laundering, Bitcoin's terrorism. Like, we all know that's not true. We all know that fiat is the majority of that. It has nothing to do, but it's the fact that they can't control it. It's the fact that they can't manipulate the monetary policy to their benefit, right? So this is going to be a hell of a fight. Like, it's going to get nasty. And now Bitcoin's sitting at roughly $1 trillion asset. No big deal. But Bitcoin gets to a 5, 10, 20, right? Holy Jesus. That's what I have to say. Like, it's going to be nasty, so.
We've seen now, I think, this narrative for months. Each different product, each different item, commodity, whatever it is, gets blown up in price for the flavor of the month, whatever reason they want to give us. Is there one in particular? Is there a certain commodity in particular that either of you are worried or concerned about, that if the price gets to a certain level, that is the breaking point for society?
Phil?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. You know what? I don't really have a number, but that question does make me think, how far can we push everyone? Right? Like, how far can we push everyone? Like in Europe, right? Like, okay, so for example, we're paying essentially what we're paying in the US now are the prices Europe has been paying for gas for like the last, 10, 15, whatever years. Okay. And in Canada, it's not much different either. So, people are sitting here freaking out about the gas prices, not realizing that there's a good portion of the rest of the world that has already been paying these prices. And Don't get me wrong, they're all getting to work and they're all paying their bills and life is going on. Not to say that it's okay, but my point is that you just got those people to deal, to deal with it. So, okay, this is probably not the level where the problems begin. I think, this kind of goes back to a book that I'm actually reading right now and almost finished, which is, When Money Dies, which is the story about Weimar Germany. People were not able to afford food or certain amenities from one day to the next, and they were still trying to figure out how to survive, and they weren't revolting. So I don't know. You know what? Unfortunately, I think our capacity for misery is really, really high. So I don't really know how bad it has to get. But I can tell you this, unfortunately, we are going to find out. Like that is just, I think that is a reality of things. Like we are going to find this out.
Nico, I don't know if you had anything to add there.
Yeah, look, I think it's gas. Whether people want to believe it's electric cars. No. The world runs on fossil fuels. Okay. So if that keeps going up, oil keeps going up, that's going to hurt every other. The sticker shock is going to be the trucks that deliver the food, the ships, all that stuff, right? It's a domino effect. And I think that is going to be interesting. And look, I hate getting fiat political, like I say. But, the current administration, I don't know what they're doing. Like, I have no idea, like, why are they attacking oil and gas? Like, that doesn't make sense to me, right? Sorry about that. That doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know. I don't know what they're, like, I don't know what they're trying to get out of this. I don't know if they're so caught up in their green version vision of the world, but I don't think it's grounded in reality, right? The majority of Americans, first of all, can't afford an electric car and don't own an electric car, right? So why are you actively attacking them? And then it's as if, and I said this yesterday, it's almost as if they're centrally planning to try to pivot the U.S. economy away from oil and gas to electric. But we know that centrally planned economies always catastrophically fail. The free market's always better. So to me, I'm just looking at it and I'm in confusion, right? I don't understand it, right? So I think that's really what's going to get people up in arms. Now the inflation aspect of it, I think is a whole other thing. Let's see. I don't know. You guys cover this better. I went straight to Bitcoin. I don't know any of the traditional finance stuff very well. This is what I always ask Phil. I'm like, Phil, I always ask him for this. So I'm very doubtful. Okay. From a conceptual standpoint, I do understand it. I'm very doubtful that they'll be able to raise rates. Because if you look at the history of the rate thing, it's like every time they raise it, it's a little bit lower than the last time. And then this time they don't have the wiggle room. And then everyone's like, oh, Volcker in the 70s. Like, Volcker had like 5, 6, 7, 8 points. They don't have that tool today. So I don't know how they are going to control this. I don't see that. I don't see it happening. And then it was Peter Thiel, right, that had this awesome speech. And he made the analogy of the Wizard of Oz, right? And people kind of see Jerome Powell and the Fed like the Wizard of Oz, right? But once you pull the cape, right, it's, you see it and it's like, they're just printing money, right? So look, out of all their actions, they're master communicators to tell you, we are going to raise rates, but at the same time, not right now. It's like, it's double speak. And to me, it's insanity that most of the world's economy is the markets are based on what the F this guy has to say on Wednesday. That blows my mind. Not
just any guy, a lawyer. A
lawyer. What the F is that?
Only the best.
What the F is that? So, like, the whole system is just, but again, like, I'm seeing this and you guys are seeing it, and the people watching this, I'm seeing it. You guys are seeing it from the perspective of a Bitcoiner. So you're seeing it from like, we could do better than that, right? But there's so many, I would say the majority of planet Earth is still plugged in to the fiat matrix. They have no clue. Like, they have no clue things should be better. This is just how things are, right? So those are my thoughts.
Chris, I'd love to also give you the chance to sort of talk on a commodity before I share my thoughts on it as well. Is there a commodity that you're keeping an eye on or most nervous about?
Yeah, I mean, it's the price of oil. I mean, gasoline and the barrel of oil, exactly to Nico's point. My previous life, I was an engineer, specifically in the energy sector. And going along that, barrels of oil control, I don't want to say control the price of everything, but it definitely dictates the price of everything else. If it's more expensive to get gasoline to get in trucks that transport food to all the supermarkets, that's going up. Electric cars, it's going to be more expensive to mine the silicon and lithium and everything that's needed for the products that go into an electric car. So that 70,000 car that they're saying you can get that you have no gas, well, it's more expensive to ship. It's more expensive to mine the elements that are needed for it, getting the metals out of the ground. We don't even have to get into the environmental impacts of that alone. But, solar panels, it costs a lot of energy, whether in the form of diesel or oil to do that. Any of the windmills, those polyethylene blades or polypropylene blades, are made up of oil byproducts. So if oil gets more expensive, that gets more expensive. You're hindering all the other forms of electricity because they require backhoes, trucks, dump trucks, tractor trailers, 18-wheelers, you name it. If the prices of those filling it up goes up, everything else goes up in tandem. It's not immediate, but it's definitely a leading indicator before a lagging indicator with everything else.
So my thought process is borrowed from David Friedberg. I really resonated with what he said, and what both you, Chris, and Cornicus and Nico, all of you guys have said, I think, very valid things, but there's one thing in particular that I am worried about, and it's wheat, because of how many calories wheat provides to the world. I fucking hate gluten. I still eat and consume gluten. In the US, they tell you need 2,000 calories, and that is because we're a gluttonous country. That's not even how many you need to survive. I believe the number is 1,200 or 1,500. Someone in the comments somewhere correct me. It's one of those two figures. If wheat production decreases, mind you, we only plant for 90-day cycles. That means we only have enough wheat to last us for the next 90 days. The period where we're supposed to start planting and growing is coming up at the end of this month. And of course, if you're not aware, Russia, Ukraine provides about 40% of the wheat for the entire world. Now, how does that actually impact and how does that get doled out? Well, of course, the rich countries are going to eat. They'll pay the premiums, whatever it costs. And in the meantime, the lower and lesser developed countries are going to get rocked. And they're not going to be able to afford to buy the food coming into their country. They're not going to be able to then give food to their population. And as a result, I think that will trigger so many more things that we can't even imagine. What happens when a whole country can't feed themselves, but they know that their neighboring country can? You really think they're just going to sit there and do nothing? You don't think that, the people who hop over the border here in America, you don't think that's going to amplify if all of a sudden no other country south of us is able to afford the calories to provide to its people, let alone the people having the money to buy said calories? And it's weird that we have to start thinking of things through this lens of, can you afford enough calories to live both as a citizen and as a country? That to me is, I think, one of the most terrifying things happening in real time. I bought into this narrative and I've done my own due diligence and found that it is false. There was like this meme going around for some time, I think in 2020, where the wealth gap in America is wider than the wealth gap ahead of the French Revolution. That is actually not the case. Ahead of the French Revolution, the top 10% of France held 90% of the wealth. Thankfully, we're not there. They only hold, in America, 70% of the wealth right now. So it's like, we're not there yet. But guys, we need to fix that. Besides the fact that gas, there's a secondary issue that I have with just the global gas markets in general, and it's the cartel. It's the fact that it's just a giant freaking mob that dictates to the rest of the world how and when they can operate. The fact that Putin gets a seat at the OPEC plus meetings, but is kicked out of everything else, shows me and proves to me the fact that the oil markets are so manipulated. The fact that Iran has upwards of 100 million barrels of oil sitting in the Persian Gulf, waiting to be told, where can we sell this to? Like, we just need to do this at this point. It will be very interesting, I think, how oil is operated in this intermediary in the future. I am kind of curious though, Nico, you mentioned a certain point where why did our political leaders buy into this narrative that we have to get off of oil? Um, like I was pounding this drum over the weekend with some family. I'm a big snowboarder. I go to the mountains as often as I can. This has been one of the worst seasons across the Rockies. It's been dry. There's not been enough rainfall. The snowfall has been very minimal at best. And you're looking at potentially ending a season very short. It started late and it's going to end early. This has been an iteration that we've been seeing in just one instance of outdoor activities that I love to highlight. I'm a big believer in nature. I love nature. I go to the beach. I live in LA. My rule is if I go to the beach, I pick up a piece of trash. What our government officials are doing may not necessarily be correct, but I think this reliance on a cartel to dictate to us how and when we can drive our cars, that is, I think, a motivating factor to get off of this oil standard. If it means that they themselves want to create the cartel or be in charge of the cartel, that remains to be seen. But I'm curious where or what you're sort of seeing as far as why we're not involved or why we're trying to get off of oil and gas.
Well, I mean, so like think about how that cartel was created, right? It's because they have a monopoly on the, it's not really the creation of oil, but I'm going to say it like that, on the mining or the extracting of oil. America had, and I'm sure Chris could add to this, they had a shale boom, right? We figured out how to extract more oil out of the ground, and by doing so, it actually hurts the cartel. So if you want to take power away from the cartel, America needs to start mining the oil again, right? So, but again, that would de-incentivize, right? That would de-incentivize this green movement that they're trying to do. But let me talk a little bit about, so first of all, I think all of us care about the planet. I live in Miami, right? I live right next to the water. It's the same thing, right? The ocean, it's tragic. The amount of trash in there, horrible. So I'm not trying to discredit any of that. I think we all care about the planet. But what I am trying to discredit is these bureaucrats do not have the capability, because they've never done it, to fix this. Going to Glasgow on private jets and virtue signaling to the world that you want a greener world, no one's listening to you when you have an 80-car motorcade. China didn't even show up, right? So I think that giving bureaucrats trying to centrally plan the world into a greener market, it's BS. Let the free market do its thing, right? And if you want to fix the cartel, if you don't want to be dependent on the cartel, unleash American energy. We have it here. I don't know if this was political propaganda or not, but it was like energy. We were energy independent at one point. I don't know how factually that is, but let's say 80 or 70% of that is true. Right? Now we're in a position where we're actively buying oil from hostile countries like Iran, and it's like the incentives are so messed up. And one last thing, in Germany, right, the policies there, they tried to be green, and it was absolutely catastrophic, and the country ended up burning more coal anyway. Because who would have thought, if you don't produce energy in your home and you just buy it from someone else, that someone else is burning coal to make that energy. So it's not sensical. And now I've heard rumblings that they're turning on their nuclear energy is very, very green, right? I think that people have PTSD from, the Chernobyl and all that, but how far the technology has come since then, right? And the fact that it's not being looked at, and you're trying to prop up so-called renewable energies, which Chris could, he's an engineer, so he knows more than this. Renewable energies suck, right? They don't correlate with the demand. It doesn't make sense, right? Like wind energy doesn't make sense. Solar doesn't make sense. They would not exist without government subsidy. So the whole thing to me is just like, look, I think it's a bad ideology. I think I think it has to do with control, trying to control things. But again, I think Bitcoiners are all a little bit paranoid, but that's my perspective. I can't explain it, bro. I can't explain someone getting elected into office, okay? and them willfully hurting all those other people that are buying gas. I don't understand it. For me, it doesn't make sense. Like, aren't you supposed to look, whatever your beliefs on social issues are, doesn't matter. But aren't you, as a president, supposed to make the lives of Americans better? Whose lives improve with this? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. I still haven't been able to figure it out.
Yeah, Phil, is there anything else you have to add there?
Just wanted to add to Q's point here on on wheat, right? I never thought of that. That's a very good point. And if we zoom out and just kind of remove some of the nuance, right? What do we see? We see the ever escalating prices of gas, right, and oil, and as Q was talking about, the price, or the availability of wheat. So if we zoom out and just take a look at these things, what's happening here? Stopping people from moving around, stopping produce from moving around, stopping products from moving around, and at the same time starving a population. When people are malnourished, I mean, it's no secret, right? They've been telling us about this in school. Brain function decreases, energy levels decrease, capability. Like, look, all of that stuff goes down the tube. Now, look, tinfoil hat, that seems kind of convenient if you want to get a whole bunch of people to accept a terrible system. I mean, like, wow, look at that. You can't go anywhere. You're not eating well. We've got a solution. We've got a solution. You just got to give up a little more of that freedom. Anyways, it freaks me out.
Of the tinfoil hat in this show.
And that's the tragic part about it, right? Is that, like, you sound, just the mere fact that you're talking about this, you sound like Alex Jones. You sound like a conspiracy theorist. You cannot openly look. I remember when the stuff started to come out in relation to the World Economic Forum and all that stuff. I was like, I was telling Phil every day after the show, I'm like, bro, we sound like conspiracy theorists. Like, we sound like crazy people. Over time, more evidence started to come up. And then that's when I realized, holy crap, we are able to say things that legacy media is not able to say. And that's why you are seeing, and the attempt to censor people like Joe Rogan, because he's able, for example, Russell Brand said it yesterday, right? And it was a viral video, right? Why aren't we hearing that from our betters? Why aren't we hearing that from the media? Why are they focusing on issues that aren't really important to where you are? It's like, I don't understand it. I don't see how you can come to another conclusion. Sorry.
So I actually have a theory on that, and it's a lot less tinfoil hatty, and it says black and white as following the money. But in a capitalistic system where all businesses are derived from the idea of maximize profits, you then have media companies catering to whatever the lowest common denominator wants. That's why you get the hyperbolic news on both Fox and CNN. That's why there always is, in my opinion, there's always a war going on. There's always some sort of a famine going on. There's always some sort of disease. As far back as mad cow disease, I can remember this. And there's always a natural disaster. And what do these four things have in common, as someone who's never read the Bible knows? They're the four things that happen right before the end of the world. So they're always on the news. There's always those four things, especially on American news, that are always happening because we're in a Jesus-loving country. People are always worried about the fact that, when is the world going to end? These are the four triggers of it. So there's always that on the news. So I think a part of it is based around this idea of we just need to get people scared enough to keep tuning in. But I don't want to stay on that topic. That's just my less sexy. What is less sexy than a tinfoil hat? My saran wrap hat. That's what we'll call that.
But let me.
I love it though.
Let me go back to that. Right.
Please.
Why is it that independent media could just talk normal? And if you look at the numbers, for example, Joe Rogan right now is 11 million average viewers per episode. Tucker Carlson, number 2, 3.5. Joe Rogan is having normal conversations, no end of the world, because I hear you, right? And the country is so divided right now that you have the right wingers that are like, this is the end of the world, and you have the left that's like, those are fascists, right? It's so divided. I've never seen it this way. It's absolutely crazy, right? But you have people like Joe Rogan. He successfully straddles, right? You could listen to Joe Rogan as someone who comes from the left. This guy's awesome. You can listen to Joe Rogan from the right. This guy's awesome. It's only legacy media. It's only the establishment media, because everyone else, it's like if you see any independent content creator and they're blowing up, right? There is no narrative. There is no whatever. It's just like speaking about events that are happening. So and I was telling this to Phil earlier, right? In 2003, if social media was around, we would not have invaded Iraq. Their ability to control information, the narrative, rested on their ability to control the gatekeepers of information, which are publications and our legacy media. The internet has completely disintermediated them, and they don't know how to control it, so they rely to censorship. And now add into the mix Bitcoin. And what do you get? You get a fuck ton of chaos. And that's exactly what we're living through. Right? So I don't know, man. I think that it's not a right or left issue. I think this really has to do with legacy media and their ability to be able to control giant swaths of the population through narratives. And now the internet has hampered their ability to do so. Dude, I don't know. It's a rabbit hole.
Well, just my last comment on this, and then I am going to pass the mic to Chris. I think what we have to be asking is what takes a media company from just media sharing the news to legacy. And it tends to be there's some sort of money, either a Wall Street firm or someone who made a lot of money on Wall Street, who is looking at this no longer as a source of information, but as a business. And that's that shift. Thank God for David Bailey. Thank God for the likes of CK and Pete Rizzo and Mike Germano and Alex McShane, because if they saw how much money this show actually makes, Bitcoin Magazine, probably not around for much longer.
I'll steal wise words from the comedian George Carlin. And, he said, it's one big club and you ain't in it. Mm-hmm. And that comes down to money, the bastardization of money. I'll tie back into what Nico was saying. The reason that a lot of these politicians are gaslighting all this energy we're finding, whether we were finding fracking, I believe Nico brought up, that it's a deflationary thing. And I think the price of tomorrow, the more I keep going back to it, it's really like a masterpiece in the book that Jeff Booth made. In the book, I know he said it to a lot of high profile people. He didn't name names, but basically they're all like, Jeff, you're completely right, but we can't stop printing money. When we're getting deflationary things such as finding excess energy sources, whether that's through natural gas, through fracking, through nuclear, whatever it may be, all these oil and gas companies have large balance sheets. And people don't understand this. I know many real estate people harp on this. The reason that real estate people keep getting more and more in debt is because we're inflating the currency faster and faster. So they're able to pull out money through a refinance. They're able to use other people's money to get debt and then get paid money from other people. So the reason that I'm not going to go conspiracy theory, but I'll go a little conspiracy theory here. It's not in oil and gas companies' best interest for these alternative sources of energy to come out, whether it's mini nuclear reactors, whether it's fracking from natural gas, whether it's any of these other things. So at the same time that we're seeing all these supply chain shortages or problems with energy, politicians need to throw money at things that, whether they know it or not, don't work, but make a good story, because then the price of the oil and gas can go up. And this is not to harm, consumers. This is because oil and gas are quite literally trillions of dollars in debt, and they have to owe their debts. And so the price of it going up benefits them, and they need to pay their bills, and they need to pay their bills. And the banks have bills against oil and gas companies. And then the banks have bills against other central banks. And then it's all this debt pyramid, as you want to call it. It's a house of cards, and the base is made of sand. It's not even on a coffee table. So it just goes to show the money is the source of the problem. In a world where we have a deflationary currency, you're rewarded for finding the cheapest and best energy. You're not looking for things to make the price of things go up because you're not in debt and you don't have debtors to pay back. So that's just that's my long energy engineering rant. I can definitely go into a bigger deep dive of that. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to expand on, Q, Nico, or Phil on that.
Dude, I really look. I love your perspective. Clearly, you come from the field. You're an insider, so to speak, right? And I love that perspective, man. I love speaking to people that work within the field because they always give you, the signal and not the noise. So I appreciate that, bro.
I appreciate that a lot. I mean, now I left that world because I saw the Ponzi scheme that it was. It's built on lies. So now I work for a Bitcoin company. So very different. But I'm loving every second of it. I'll pass it over to Q if you have any more questions to expand on that, or we can go tinfoil hat if you would like as well.
Dude, you know me, I'll always go tinfoil hat for days on end.
But wait, hold on. To be fair, okay, because I'm telling you, I've had an existential crisis about this. Okay,
we all have. That's why we're here.
I'm looking at Phil. I'm like, Phil, are we a right-wing, alt-right conspiracy channel? And he's like, no. So it was so hard for us. Like, you have no idea how hard it was for the first 3 or 4 months, because we're like, dude, they're not reporting this on the news. We're lunatics. But this was the validation. Okay, this was like our glory moment, is that we started seeing, no joke, this has happened to us like 5 or 6 times already, where we report on something and a month or two months later we see it on like Tucker Carlson. Exactly what we were saying. We see it on the media. So that to us is like, okay, this might be seen as a conspiracy theory now, right? But again, and we don't speculate like Alex Jones at like it's like, it's the end of the world, they're demons. Like, we don't do that, right? We try to source our material. So it's like, okay, there's a newspaper, we're going to read from it. This is our case, right? And what disheartens me, bro, is the fact that people that are so-called journalists can't tell the truth more than, forgive me, Phil, 2 idiots on YouTube. Okay, like that, it blows my mind. If that is not a personification or whatever, a representation, better said, of the fiat world, I don't know what is. Like, it's so broken in so many ways. They're more interested in telling propaganda and narrative stories than they are on actually reporting or doing their best on reporting on what's going on. And that's why Joe Rogan is so popular. That's why Russell Brand is becoming so popular. That's why independent media is becoming so popular, because people, I think, have a natural tendency to seek out the truth, and they're not getting it from where they were getting it before, or if they were ever getting it from there before. We don't know.
Well, this really starts to make you question, everything you've been told, right? Like, now we're starting to see these memes pop up where it's like, all these people that were telling you to, put on masks and, stay indoors and do all this stuff. Well, now all of a sudden these same people are pro-freedom. It's like, you can't just do that, right? Like, you can't just go and flip-flop like that. Like, the morals and the integrity, it has to be there. And it just, we're just not seeing it anymore. And what's really interesting is that the advent of the internet and social media has created a situation, right, where, okay, so we'll take social media in one piece, and we'll also add Bitcoin, okay, because Bitcoin plays a major factor in this. Alex Jones. So I've been watching Alex Jones since I was like 17 years old. Okay,
come on, Phil.
I'll explain so much about you.
like, I've been watching him since I'm like 17, and I'm like, this guy is amazing, but no one's going to believe it, right? And this is the thing. It doesn't matter how right we are. If we're too early, it's just like being wrong. Okay, number one. And number two, if you don't have, like, he didn't have Bitcoin. So it doesn't matter everything that he was saying. Like I watched all the videos where he's yelling at the, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. Sorry?
Alex Jones had Bitcoin. He got like 1,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
10,000
famously lost
Kaiser.
No,
Kaiser.
but I'm saying like before there was Bitcoin, he didn't have Bitcoin. So like he would sit there and spout all this stuff, and everyone was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And then the mainstream, the corporate media could then spin their own story, and there you go, Alex, you're full of it. But now, yeah.
No. I want to take the other side of this, but please finish.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, but now there's Bitcoin. So not only can he go and spout the truth, but and say, you see, this shows how our money's broken. It is the perfect Black Mirror, so to speak. So, anyways.
Well, Black Mirror was created by a man who was sent from the future, talking about all the stuff. that is true, just like Satoshi Nakamoto came from the future. But those are just, tinfoil hat.
No, those are not tinfoil. Those are facts, bro. What are you talking about?
But I want to unpack both of those things because, Nico, I agree with you. When I started doing this show, I had reservations on it, and I was very loud anytime I would come on, and I would say like, I view myself as a liberal in regards to like the Bitcoin ecosystem. I believe that Black lives do matter. I do believe in certain liberal policies. I think that not necessarily everyone does. So Renee Lacoste, to answer your questions, like I view myself more left leaning, if you will. But then I had to ask myself, what does that mean? Thank you to Mark Moss, who like really helped push me there. I take the other side of that of the table as Coin Icarus. I despise Alex Jones. I thought like the ramblings of this idiot who just like makes whatever claim he wants because he has a platform to do it, and people are just going to believe him. Because I disagree with you as well, Nico. I don't think people at large seek out the truth. I think people at large absorb what information is easiest for them to find. And historically speaking, that has been the case. I think in the iterations before, everyone had a printing press and everyone was able to read or write. You look to your religious leaders, and whatever they said was law. If they said, hey, if you don't donate money, God is going to smite your house. Well, lo and behold, where those taxes that we're paid now that we don't pay to our churches today, those were taxes to the churches long before they knew that they were actually being taxed. Fast forward to present day, it's whatever's the trending thing on Twitter. You open up Netflix and there's the Netflix top 10, and none of these movies are ever Oscar nominated. These aren't the best thought-provoking films. These are literally garbage, whatever products designed to just like get you to sit there on your couch, hear the da-da of Netflix, and get you addicted to having background noise. True story. This is literally what Netflix is doing to you. Like, as someone who used to work in Hollywood, I was an agent. I covered Netflix. I sold TV shows to Netflix. Let me tell you, they literally don't care that you are sharing your login with your neighbor. They don't, because eventually you're going to have your own family, and eventually you've accustomed yourself to hearing the da-da and then noise afterwards that you need it. It's a crutch now. They have created an addiction akin to cigarettes. It's just in your mind all of a sudden. To go further though into this whole like, what are we actually doing here as independent media? And I put independent for Bitcoin Magazine in quotes because we are not so independent. Our focus is entirely and solely on Bitcoin. Is that good or bad? The future will tell us. We can't really judge that today. I do think it is important for us, though, to those of us in this position to find the truth as often as we can, and also rebuff what we have said to be false and what is being said as false. But to your guys' point, with actual hard-earned facts. I don't think the majority of the world is going to buy into Bitcoin. I actually don't think it will ever happen. I think a majority of the world will be forced to accept and adopt Bitcoin. And I think that based on history has shown to be true. I think, unfortunately, it's going to take a small subset of people like us to push it forward. And eventually the rest of the world is just going to fall in line because, unfortunately, we as people have become more sheep than the shepherd.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points. And I think, I think that as a society, right, I think the people empowered really benefit from divide and conquer. And I think that once I'm originally from Venezuela, had a traumatic experience, or my family did, better said, with the socialist government takeover of Venezuela. So naturally, I live in Miami, so socially I'm very left leaning, but economically I'm right leaning, right? But I have many friends on the left. That's the thing, is that they make you believe that it's like the other side is the boogeyman to distract you from the fact that the uniparty is the one messing everything up. And we actually have a lot in common, right? So it's the whole thing, and I think this is a fundamental issue, is that I think that no one deserves, right, that the power of the money printer. I don't think that any human being has the capacity to deal with that much power. It's impossible, right? And by having that much power, they have a very, very big ability to go back to your point, to manipulate the truth, or to kind of structure the world in a way where it's like, this is how I want you to see the world, right? Did you see that movie with, speaking of Netflix, did you see that movie? It was a terrible movie. It was
Don't Look Up.
Yeah, that, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, because I forced Chris to sit down and watch it, because
that was propaganda to the most finest extent, right? That was beautiful propaganda, the entire movie, right? It's like it wanted you to see the world from a certain perspective, right? And I think that, people on the right are like, no, my perspective is right, and the people on the left is like, no, my perspective. I think both perspectives is right? I think that there's both valid points on both sides, but I think that the issue is not so much the boogeyman people on the left or the boogeyman people on the right. It's the people that control the goddamn money printer. Like, they are the cause of the problem, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think that the corruption that comes with the ability to just right and left, right? The left spends it on social programs. The right tends to spend it on war, right? But it's like this ability to just print money and just pay for things is insanity to me. Like, it doesn't make sense. And I think that Bitcoin is going to fix that. And by fixing that, I think it's going to lift a lot of people, because that's a main staple of the left, right? Is a lot of people are poor. A lot of people are, like kind of taken out. They're othered in society. I would say that the main cause of that is the money printer itself, right? So I think that's what we need to focus on. And this is going to get rough. So I have a question for you, Q, if you don't mind. What are your thoughts on it was like the current, I think it's tragic, Elizabeth Warren taking advantage of the tragic crisis in Ukraine to try to pass this horrible bill to attack Bitcoin, because that's really what it is. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to go big picture and then small, and I'm going to say something that may not sit with everyone well, but this is my perspective as a Middle Eastern immigrant. If you were against having refugees from any Middle Eastern country, or in particular Iraq or Afghanistan, into America, but then you are welcoming Ukrainian immigrants with open arms, you are the problem. You are literally the problem. That is my big rant on that. I think, unfortunately, what Elizabeth Warren is doing is the political playbook. Never let a good crisis go to waste. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. I don't buy into any of it. And one of my big things that I will continue to pound the drum on the other side of that spectrum is, while I don't buy anything any politician ever says anymore, like, there's nothing a politician can say. They could literally come to me personally and say they will write off my student loan expenses. I'm not going to pay taxes for 10 years, put it in a contract. Do you have my vote? No, nothing you say or do I'm going to buy into anymore, on the basis of you've never done anything you said. So why? And then I'll bring this back to Bitcoin. Why do we buy into the politicians who are pro Bitcoin, who are running on these platforms? Someone like Ted Cruz, the lifelong grifter of them all. I don't buy into either of their stances. I think Elizabeth Warren is doing this literally to buy votes. I don't think she actually cares about Bitcoin or knows enough about Bitcoin to make proper legislation, but she has a contingent of voters who are anti-Bitcoin enough and vocal enough that she wants to at least cater to that base and guarantee however many million votes that she's going to get by outlandishly saying or claiming certain things. At the same time as someone like Ted Cruz saying Bitcoin should be in Texas, we're the best, we have energy, blah, blah, blah. But it's Cynthia Loomis who's pushing through this legislation. She's the one writing it. She's the one who's actually doing the work. Ted Cruz is just the one who has the biggest microphone and the biggest stage and said the right words at the right time. So I think both of them are the perfect example of you're just grifting for votes without a true understanding of the technology behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that no politician should be trusted. I don't trust politicians. I just pay attention to their incentives, right? And with Ted Cruz, in his case, he's just saying that because there's a very large mining presence in Texas. That's the only reason he's saying that, right?
Another million votes.
That's what I'm saying. So like he needs the donors, he needs the stuff. Lummis too. Wyoming is a very poor state. She's trying to bring business into the state, right? So I'm paying attention to the incentives. I don't know why. Think about it, because we know, for example, the majority of millennials, right, a good portion of millennials own, I hate to use this word, but that's what it is, crypto, right? And she's actively attacking it. That doesn't make sense to me. Like there's something misaligned there. I would like to believe it's a little bit more nefarious than the reason that you're looking at it. I would like to believe, based on what I've seen, right? And I also had an existential crisis about this when Phil was there to see this, to witness this. I was like, I would hate, like, because in my head, dude, I saw this happening over time, like slowly in slow motion. And I've just seen her escalate. But the reasons as to why she was escalating it never made sense to me. Like, for example, the recent video that kind of went viral where she's talking about how Russians could potentially circumvent sanctions. Then the CEO of Chain Analysis was like, that's not really capable, but because she wasn't getting the answer that she wanted, she kind of got upset. So again, dude, like I'm not so concerned like what Ted Cruz has to say. I'm not so concerned what Elizabeth Warren has to say. I'm just paying attention to their incentives, and I'm paying attention to their actions. And what I'm seeing from Elizabeth Warren is, because I can't control this, we need to get rid of it. That's what I'm seeing from her, right? Because there's the reasons as to what she gives, they don't ring out. Like they don't check the list, right? So what is going on there? And I actually had this conversation with Dennis Porter at Unconfiscatable in Vegas. How do we get more people on the left? Because the Bitcoin is bipartisan, it's for both sides. How do we get people on the left, establishment left, powerful left politicians to support Bitcoin more? How do we do that? Because whether we like it or not, and this is a very troubling pattern, and to me, it's heartbreaking, we have acceptance, other than Donald Trump, we have acceptance from the establishment Republican Party on the right in the United States. And from the establishment left, Hillary Clinton to Elizabeth Warren, we have anger, right? Like why is that happening? I don't like that. I think it helps the left because it helps disenfranchised people that, the banking system is fucked over. It helps the poor. It protects them from inflation. So this helps. But why are they getting so much? Why is there getting resistance? And that, to me, that's tragic. It's very unfortunate. And I'm not in that position to because I live in a red state. I have my own personal beliefs, but I always encourage people like Dennis. He lives in Portland. And I'm like, dude, like you have to get on this, bro. Like you have to use your platform to take care of this, because I would hate for this to become a partisan issue. It would be tragic for me. But that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a slow pattern of how it's playing out.
I want to just make one comment as the token lib. I think to accomplish what you're asking us to accomplish is a redefinition, and not necessarily in the landscape of Bitcoin, but a redefinition of Bitcoin on us for the world. We have the meme of Bitcoin fixes this, and we joke philosophy, politics, sociology, economy, all of that stuff. And it's true, Bitcoin does solve a lot of these issues, but we don't spend enough time defining a lot of them. And no different than yourself, I view myself very much at this point in my life, liberal as far as social issues are concerned, but physically speaking, like I want a separation of the financial markets and state. I don't think any current political leader anywhere in the world is going to buy into that. But especially with the Democrats and the left-leaning people in our government, at least, if we go at it from the angle of, well, this gives banking access to those who are unbanked, if this gives opportunities to people who are left out of the current system, coming at it from a more social aspect is how you, I think, for lack of a better word, indoctrinate those who maybe don't see the financial and economic benefits of it, because that's not necessarily their priority. Their priority is literally maximize how much money they can take out of yours and mine's pocket, versus the other side is trying to minimize that. Let them deal with the economic stuff. Let the Democrats and liberals figure out, how do we get access to Bitcoin? How do we make sure everyone has internet access? How do we make sure everyone has a safe, secure wallet? I think going at it from that lens with the Democrats allows it to be fully encompassed and covered. But that's just my ramblings that I'm going to stop, because we are at that time.
Yeah, I'm sorry so much, guys. It's been a pleasure having you both, Nico and Phil. Let us know where people can find you guys. You guys have a great show. Let them know the time frames. I know I always catch up on YouTube, but I don't know when it actually airs because I'm busy during the day.
Yeah, so so Monday through Saturday, sometimes we miss a day, but we'll let you know before. You could find us at 12:45 Eastern Standard Time, at 12:45 p.m., of course. And the channel's called Simply Bitcoin. You can subscribe. It's the Bitcoin news from the pleb perspective and the catastrophic fails from Phil's perspective and Nico's takes. So yeah, we really appreciate you guys having us on. That was a great time.
Yeah.
Rabbit hole for sure.
Honestly, you guys are going to have, I'm just saying this now live on air, so you get bullied into coming back on, because this is just too much fun. But you guys will also be in Miami, right? You're both speaking.
Yep.
We are.
We will see you there.
We'll get to meet you guys in the flesh.
We would, by the way, we would love to have Q and Chris. You guys we would love to have you guys on the show.
Yeah.
And redo this, but on Simply
We can
Bitcoin.
continue this over there.
Yeah, we can continue this conversation and just move it on over there.
We are always down. Have
Awesome.
fun with Gladstein tonight. Everyone should actually take the time to watch at least tonight's episode with Alec Gladstein, and then get hooked on your guys' show, and then never leave. This is the morning show. That's the evening show, guys.
Appreciate it.
We
As
appreciate
always,
it. Thank you.
Of course. And as always, guys, use code YTMAG. Get 10% off your Bitcoin conference tickets so Chris and I can keep our jobs. We'll be back after a short commercial break with Dr. Jeff Ross, and we're going to dive right into the equities markets and see what's cooking in there and how that's affecting Bitcoin. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss that. All right. We are live. What is up, fam? Hammersaw, I love you, dude. You are so off base on this. You have a homework assignment tonight. You have to watch 30 minutes of CNN and read something on MSNBC. Sorry, but that's your homework tonight. We all have to literally go out of our ways to read a perspective that we don't agree with. Otherwise, you just live in your own echo chamber. So calling you out because I think you need to do it tonight. And then DM me. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. But before that happens, we are joined by one of my favorite guests that we've ever had on the show. That's why he's on for the second time, Dr. Jeff Ross. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Q.
Of course, man. I'm going to just sort of dive right into it with you. We've seen CPI inflation hitting new all-time highs yet again. We have PPI inflation now hitting double digits, the first of these inflation numbers that they're willing to tell us is double digits. We finally get our first Fed interest rate hike. And by the way, the market seems to have corrected itself and found a bottom, because that makes sense in the midst of global conflict in Eastern Europe. I will let you tell us, what is it that you're paying the most attention to right now?
Yeah, so great. Thanks again for having me on. It's fun to be on your show. You guys are just doing awesome work with this. Let's see. So where are we right now? So my view hasn't changed much, to be honest. I was bearish the last time I came on. I've picked up the nickname Dr. Bear on Twitter, and I'm okay with that because at some point I'll flip, and that will be like a big party day for everybody. We'll pop some champagne. I'm still bearish. So what does that mean? I think that the economy is continuing to decelerate, and now it's becoming more and more obvious to basically anyone who's paying attention. It looks like we peaked in Q4 of 2021, and now we just are going to have a series of worse and worse year over year economic comparisons. So that's the economy. Number two, inflation. Inflation is just raging, as everybody knows. It's making quality of life miserable for everybody, right? Your gas is expensive, your groceries are expensive, housing is going up. Everything is terrible. That's the huge drawback of inflation that most Americans don't understand because they've never lived through it. Most people aren't old enough to have lived through the 70s. I was born in the 70s, so I don't remember it. I do remember just kind of slumming it as a little kid, and that was just kind of how everybody lived back then. So I think we're living through a slumming it decade. I think the 2020s, unfortunately, are going to be marked with tumultuous geopolitical events and rising prices and a stagnant economy, so stagflation. So what is inflation doing? I think we're basically at or near a peak right now. Could we go higher? Could the March CPI and PPI prints be higher? Sure. Could April? Possibly. Here's what I think is going to happen. Wait, I'll tell you what. Here's what I'm going to think in just a second. Let me finish this. Third, we have the Fed still talking about tightening. So they raised rates 25 basis points. I think they're going to continue to raise rates. Why? Because they have to, because inflation is so high right now. They have to let the markets, they're going to sacrifice the markets for inflation. That's the politically most powerful thing to do. That's what Biden wants. That's what the White House wants. Now, if it were Trump, I would think a totally different thing. I would think they're going to say, screw inflation. We're going to prop the markets because Trump wants to get reelected, or something like that. Trump's not in anymore. Biden's here. So that's what I think the focus is going to remain, is on inflation and how do we tame inflation. Whether or not that even actually works, whether or not the Fed truly does have control over the over inflation, I'm very skeptical of that. So that's what we have. We have the Fed tightening into a weakening economy with really ugly inflation metrics. What happens when that happens? Risk on assets don't do well. So what have we seen since November and December of 2021? A series of lower highs and lower lows. Basically, we're stair-stepping down, down, down. Every time we go up a little bit, the optimists come back in full force. They call me stupid. They say I was wrong. And then we hit another high, lower high, and then we go down again. So what I'm doing is every time we ramp up, just like we did last week into Friday, I took that as an opportunity Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to short things. So I was shorting tech stocks. I was shorting small cap stocks, shorting the Qs, which is NASDAQ. And I was going long again, increasing my positions in energy, increasing my positions in things like gold. I'm still on the sidelines with Bitcoin, basically because, so I never short Bitcoin, right? And I never, ever, ever, ever recommend that people sell Bitcoin. Make that very clear. Don't sell your Bitcoin. But if you're a trader, I still think it's in a bearish momentum, a bearish phase. Clearly, to me, it is. And so anything when we get these local highs, I think that's for people who must trade. I suggest shorting things like Ethereum, shorting things like Coinbase, shorting these crypto exchanges. If you want to, you can even short miners. Some people have issues with that. I don't, because I'll turn around and go long them once we bottom. So that was a really long answer to say, you mentioned at the beginning, we had a nice recovery. Yes, but I think it was a relief rally, a bullish relief rally within a bigger bear market. And I think we're going to go down further with risk on assets.
I'm so glad you said that, because I did the hardest thing any trader can do. And I sat on my hands watching that. Friday was the worst day. But I know Chris had something to add, but I just wanted to say thank God I sat on my hands.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, always a pleasure having you on. So I guess going into your macro view, and not to get political with it, but we're obviously going into very tumultuous times. As many people know in the United States, there's the midterm elections in November of this year. So while they have to raise interest rates to quell inflation, I don't know if 25 basis points really beats 7.9% inflation clips on the CPI index, but they're going to attempt to do this. I guess my question is, while inflation's running hot, politicians are trying to scramble for votes this year, and people's obviously 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, whatever it is, or even their Bitcoin holdings, they might go down in value because of this bearish sentiment and everything that's going on. Like, what does this lead to? And, obviously you see a bearish sentiment. How do we come out of this, basically?
Yeah. So I always tell people when they ask, first of all, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on. Great question. I always tell people to know thyself, right? So I get asked questions all the time, but I want to know first, who am I talking to? Who's my audience? So are you a short-term trader or are you a long-term investor? Because those are two totally different ways to approach a situation. So when you hear people like me, who I trade for a living, because for Vailshire Capital Management, I'm managing volatility for my clients. They hate to see their accounts go down too much. They don't like fluctuations. They're into Bitcoin kind of, because I've been teaching them about it for about 3 years now. But they don't want to go down 80%. They don't want to see their life savings go down 80% if we have a huge bear market kind of thing. So what I'm doing is trying to hedge against that downside. So for people like me, when you hear a trader saying that, look, I think that the next several weeks and or months are going to be kind of ugly, you can come up with strategies, and I'll tell you all about strategies for how to handle that. But long-term investors, on the other hand, should be salivating, right? Because the price of your favorite asset, the king of asset, Bitcoin, literally the greatest asset that's ever been created, that we'll never see a better asset to buy and hold in our lifetimes. When the greatest asset of all time gets cheaper in price, you buy more. That's just literally what you do. You don't think about it. You're like, oh, well, what if it goes lower, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, great, dollar cost average. And if you think that I'm right and that it's going to go down and then probably dip at bottom and then start going up again in the next few months, you should be doubling your dollar cost averaging right now, because this is the low point. When we go back, say 5 years from now, we're going to look back at this time period and we're going to be like, do you see that teeny tiny little dip right there? That's where we were all stressed out, wondering, if it was going to go to zero and what we should do. I should have bought everything. I should have, sold my carpet, sold my chairs, sold my ceiling fan, sold my lamp and my lava lamp right there. I should have done all of that and bought Bitcoin at that price. So that's how I view it from a long-term perspective. You should not care at all about this kind of stuff. When traders are selling, long-term investors should be buying, and vice versa. When traders are buying, long-term investors usually sell into those things. They sell into strength. And that's just how markets work. So understand who you are, understand the kind of market conditions. Instead of panicking, start salivating when you see the price go down and start buying more.
I think it was I'm stealing this from, I think, Carl Icahn, where he said, once I started approaching the markets where if the news was sell, we're in hell, I was buying up everything. And when everyone was, oh, we're going to be rich, it's going to go up forever, that was the moment I knew to start selling. And if it works for someone like Carl Icahn, I don't think it'll fail us too badly. I am a little curious though, because you touched on it a little bit now twice. Last week's rally, I think you'll agree, was a lot of shorts being covered. And we saw it today. I haven't checked the market's action actually for a couple hours, but last I saw, the market was going down as we kind of expected. Are you sort of seeing anything that is negating that idea, or what are you looking at? Yes, confirm that the markets are down over 1% right now. What are you looking at that's confirming or not proving this?
Sure. So first of all, I actually think there are, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, unfortunately, but I just read this morning, there was a huge influx of buyers last week. So what that means to me is that lots of people believe that we did bottom last week. And that's kind of what happens. Like, everybody's freaking out. Then we have a good day, and then we have another good day, and suddenly everybody starts paying attention, like the bottom's in. And so they start flooding back into the market. And then we had a huge options expiration on Friday as well. That really balloons the amount of volume, the trading volume that goes on. I just think there's a lot of optimists, and I'm a natural optimist, right? But I'm a slave to the system I've built. So I've built this trading system that tells me when to buy, sell. It's completely non-emotional. It goes back to what Icon said, the same as Buffett, right? Buy when others are fearful, sell when others are greedy, that kind of concept. It's you got to do the opposite of what your fight or flight response is telling you. When you are panicking and you're just dying and you're watching your account go down and you see right across the board and you're like, I'm never going to retire. I'm going to work forever because my account's going down. That's actually when you want to be buying. But most people hit the sell button in a panic, and vice versa. When it's, to your point, when the markets are, ballooning up and everybody's partying and it's parabolic and everything's green, you should be taking profits then, or just, doing nothing. But most people start buying right there. So last week's rally, I think, was just a fake out. Why do I think that? Because, well, first of all, my whole worldview that I view my investing and trading is based on my macroeconomic view. So getting back to what we earlier talked about, I think everything is ugly. And I think March, April, May figures are going to be even uglier than what we've seen so far. So we have there's just ugliness out there, and most people don't realize that. I think most earnings of companies, the S&P 500, they're actually going to be basically flat to possibly negative year over year, and that's not good. So you don't ever hear about this on like CNBC though. They're going to tell you like, oh, AT&T beat by a penny. That's awesome, and then and they're going to wonder why it crashed 7% after that, and it's because things are decelerating in a really rough way. So people are going to start realizing the economy is hurting. Companies are going to start coming out on their quarterly reports, on their earnings calls. They're going to be saying, you know what, we didn't do very well in the first quarter, and actually it's not looking too hot for second quarter. And that's when people will start losing faith. Those kind of moments are when the floor drops out of markets and we see almost a capitulation type event. So I'm really curious to see how Bitcoin is going to handle this. I said about a month and a half ago when I was having kind of a spar on Twitter with some people who were very bullish about the price of Twitter. I said, I think what's going to happen is go back and look at the fourth quarter of 2018, starting in September. So if you guys remember, everybody remembers that who was in Bitcoin. The beginning of 2018, or like the end of 2017, we were up at about 20,000. It dropped all the way down, kind of wobbled down, but down to about 6,500 mid-September. And then it went flatline. And that's what I said. I think it's going to happen. It's going to go flatline, and people are going to wonder, maybe it is a safe haven asset so far. Maybe it will buck this trend. I think markets like the equities market, stock markets are going to grind lower. I think Bitcoin flatlines, and then it's going to be super rough because the floor is going to drop out. And that's when you can have a capitulation event. When that happened back in November of 2018, it dropped 50%. The other time it happened where we had a capitulation was in March of 2020. It dropped 50%. Those were painful. If you guys lived through that, you know that that's painful, but those are where legends are made. Those are where you back up the truck, you sell your kidney, you sell your lamps and your lava lamps, and you buy as much Bitcoin as you can buy. And you're going to be telling your kids about how you bought Bitcoin on that one day or that 1 month where it was just this epic buying opportunity. So I think, obviously, this is not individual investment advice. I can't see the future. I didn't come from the future. But I think that that's, in my mind, the most probable event is that we're actually going to see sideways, choppy, decreasing volatility in the price of Bitcoin, and it drops. I'm literally like praying that it happens right before the Bitcoin conference and we bottom, and then I can come on the Bitcoin stage and be like, dude, time to buy. Dr. Bearish is Dr. Bull, time to buy. That's what I want to have happen, but because I want it so bad, that means it won't happen. But so just be careful, because I think that could happen, and you want to have some dry powder saved up, some cash for buying a little more if that does happen. Because man, if you can buy Bitcoin for under 30,000, possibly around 20,000 a Bitcoin, that's awesome.
Dr. Jeff, you got to help me. Maybe me and Q take out kidneys in order to sell them on the black market so we can get more Bitcoin. But definitely on the conference, if you go to Dr. Bull, I can just imagine you walking out on stage and Stone Cold Steve Austin smashing some beers and drinking them with the shirt on.
Yes.
Now, as a guy who's running the stream, I'll selfishly want that so we can catch that for all the clips. No, but all joking aside. So Jeff, while something like this is occurring, are you stacking cash? Are you stacking gold? I guess for the trader perspective, I'll give people my personal background, and this is just not financial advice, but I know for myself, I knew I had a big tax bill coming up this year. So I've been stacking cash on the side to cover that bill. Long story short, I sold a bunch of my equities in 2020 and then early 2021 in order to buy more Bitcoin. And now, we're in 2022 and the tax man's collecting. I had a couple other expenses come up with moving and stuff. So I know I've kept my DCA the same that it's always been. Obviously, when we go super negative, I bump it up or I smash buy stuff. But I'd like to know what your perspective is. Are you stacking cash? Does your fund not let you do that? Or do you have to be in another form of equity or something like that?
Yeah, so great question. So my hedge fund, I can basically do whatever I want to, right, for optionality wise. So and then Vailshire has separately managed accounts, aggressive, moderate, conservative. So my conservative accounts obviously are the most conservative. Those are long only. I don't do any hedging in there. And then going up to my aggressive accounts, they're kind of like my hedge fund, but not quite as volatile. I don't have quite the options that I do. So I have these two camps. I have my hedge fund with all of my optionality and conservative accounts. Let's start here. Conservative accounts, long only accounts. What I strongly recommend is exactly what you were talking about. I go to cash. So the easiest way to hedge when you're concerned about something. Now I use things like, besides my macroeconomic things in my head, I also use like momentum factors and I use volatility and these other things to create this whole trading system. I invest in what has positive momentum and it makes sense from a macro standpoint. So like, what am I long right now in my conservative Vailshire accounts and all my accounts actually? Energy stocks. So, oil is crushing it, right? Gold stocks are crushing it still. Platinum, I own some platinum. What else am I long? Defense sector stocks like, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin are doing well. Other traditional safe haven stocks like Hershey's actually do really well, and they just kind of buck the trend, and the people treat them like gold almost. So those are the kind of things I'm long. I have a huge cash position, and then I'm short a ton of things. So I'm short tech. I don't have any problem shorting the FANGs. I love Amazon as a company. I'm usually long Amazon, but I'm short Amazon right now. I'm short things like crypto exchanges, which are fun. I love to short Ethereum, so I'm a short the Grayscale Ethereum fund. That's my saying. Anytime I'm nervous about the price of Bitcoin, I love to short Ethereum because it's just sort of it tends to go down even more if Bitcoin goes down, as you guys know. And I don't have a problem shorting it. And then other things, basically anything. So right now, if you look across the sectors of, you can break down the stock market into like, consumer discretionary, consumer staples, energy, tech stocks, blah, blah, blah. You can go through each of those and almost all of those are in bearish formation right now. They're all in a downtrend. They're all making a series of lower highs. So anytime those things spike like they did into the end of last week, I short the heck out of them, and I'm short all of those things right now. So that's what I recommend from my hedge fund perspective. And then again, those long only things, I'm in a huge cash position and like probably 50% cash, although it fluctuates. And then the rest in those other stocks that I mentioned, those specific sectors.
Anytime I hear about the FANG stocks getting shorted, especially right now, I think it's one of the most brilliant times. You touch on Amazon, and my initial thought is literally, oh, they're so screwed between all the planes, all of their shipping, all the vans and the fleets that they have. Like they're going to be wrecked with gas prices. Are there commodities in particular that you're paying attention to that are dictating some of these trades?
Yeah, I mean, the commodity, the most obvious one is the one I'm actually paying the most attention to is oil, right? So oil, when it ramps up, it actually carries inflation with it. So we're seeing these really high CPI and PPI numbers not completely, but a major factor is oil. And what's so interesting about it, so oil ramped up, it went partially parabolic and then it rested. I think it's going to shoot higher still. I don't know how high it goes, maybe 150, maybe 200 a barrel. So I've heard 300 a barrel. I think that's a little much, but somewhere in that range. Now, people in the commodity sectors understand that the cure for high prices is high prices, right? So if you have such a high price in oil, to your point, Q, it literally shuts down industries. You have Amazon and you have FedEx and you have airlines and you have all of these industries. You have individual truckers who have to pay for gas. When it gets to be so exorbitant, people just can't afford it anymore. And so industry actually shuts down. And so when the prices ramp up, it reaches a certain threshold where people are like, I'm out. I got to shut down. I got to just take a break because I'm losing money by driving my truck right now, or I'm losing money by flying this plane right now. So suddenly demand drops. And then this price that went parabolic to the upside on oil is going to drop down like a rock. And when that happens, I'm telling you guys, since 1970, every time oil has gone up about 50% in price, it always 6 out of 6 times since 1970 precipitates a recession shortly thereafter. And that's because just what you can think about, right? It's shutting the country down and it's shutting the world down. And we like to think that we're not completely reliant on oil because, we're moving to these other greener sources of energy and things like that, but we're still very reliant on oil. And so that's what I think is going to happen once again this time. So I'm paying very close attention. I'm long these things now. And in part, I do that so I can really keep a close eye on, because I'll keep an eye on whatever my portfolio is doing. And so if I see these things go from this kind of raging bull market to suddenly they plateau and then they drop, I'm going to get out, and then I'm going to start warning people on Twitter like the floor is about to drop out. This is when capitulation happens. This is when everything goes down. This is when, even if you hold gold and you hold treasuries and you hold safe value stocks, people are just like, I'm out. I hit the sell button, panic. I'll sell it at any price. And then that's when hopefully us who are holding cash right now, we'll be sitting here waiting for this to happen, and we'll catch you at the bottom. Like, sure, I'll buy your stock for 80% lower than it is, or sure, I'll buy Bitcoin at 20,000 a Bitcoin. I'd be happy to, And so that's how I'm looking at it. I'll probably be wrong. I think I'll be partly right and partly wrong based on experience, So I don't know what I'm going to get wrong, but I'll get something wrong. But that's kind of the playbook that I'm looking at for the coming 2 to 3 months.
Jeff, expanding on that, coming from a guy who's never owned bonds in his life, I've avoided them like the plague and I've done pretty well by doing so. But I know Dylan Leclerc, our own senior analyst here at Bitcoin Magazine, talks about whenever the 2-year crosses the 10-year, aside from I'm assuming oil prices, I've never lined up those two charts, but that's a great point. Do you think, I know we're eerily close to the 2-year crossing the 10-year, and historically that either precedes a recession or a really big depression. Do you look at that as well? Because I know Jeff Foss always brings up, debt or credit markets are the dog, while equity markets are the tail on the dog getting wagged back and forth. Is that something that you look at as well? And do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely a factor to consider, because whenever the 2s and 10s invert, that has always led to a recession. Now, I always want people to remember, just because it always has doesn't mean it always will. So you should always keep that in mind. Never say never, never say always, because there's always exceptions. All right, and I just said always, but so just be careful. But yes, so in the end, so when you see the 2 and 10, when you see the yield curve invert, within 6 to 24 months, there has always been a recession to follow. So you don't know if it's going to be 6 months or even sooner, or if it's on the longer end, 24 months out. It's hard to say. So do I think a recession is imminent? Yes, I do. Check that. Do I think a recession is inevitable? Yes, almost certainly. I think we're almost certainly going to get a recession within the next year. I don't know when it's going to happen. Do I think it's imminent? Not necessarily. It depends on what oil is doing. It depends on how fast it takes for the yield curve to invert. I actually think we might have, again, based on what I'm looking at, I think, in the next couple of weeks to months, we're going to see a big crash in these risk on assets, even more than we've seen. I think we bottom at some point, and then going into the summer, I think optimism returns and we're going to have kind of a nice summer. Most people are probably going to think we're out of the woods based on, it's harder to see this far ahead, but going 9, 12 months out, it looks like it might turn ugly again. And so at that point, we might actually get the recession that we've been waiting for and that this yield curve inversion is predicting. So I think 2022 in general is just going to be sort of an ugly year. It's a great year to accumulate. It's a great year to be out bargain hunting. If you don't quit your job, please, like if you don't have income, I would make sure you have income coming in, try to build up cash reserves, and then just sit and wait, just be like a patient hunter and wait for your favorite assets. And if maybe we don't get a bottom, but if we do, you want to be sitting on the sidelines, just waiting with cash to swoop in and buy some of these things.
How much do you think what the impending pain and doom that we're about to see over the next 12 to 18 months in the markets, how much of that is a result of the propping up of the markets over the last 2 years and all the money that's been coming in both by the Fed as well as like everyone under the sun becoming an incredible investor and meme stocks and everything? How much of that is playing into what we're about to witness?
Oh, I think most of it. I think basically what we're seeing is, and this is just our lot in life until the dollar dies, is we're going to see these inflationary everything's just pumping asset prices, and then these huge deflationary busts. And then we start over. The Fed flips again, they flip back to quantitative easing, highly accommodative policies, and it inflates. And so we see these valuations go, a traditional good valuation for, say, just like a nice value stock is about a PE, a price to earnings ratio of about 15. We've seen them go from 15 to like 20, 25, 30. We've seen tech stocks go from price to sales ratios, which is, you want usually a price to sales ratio to be around like 2 for a good stock, 2, 3, maybe 4. We've seen price to sales ratios go to 10, 20, 50 for some of these like software as a service stocks, these cloud names, Peloton kind of things, these things that don't even make money, but they just, they're like hype cycle stocks, meme stocks. that's what the monetary expansion does, is it pumps these things to just obnoxiously high levels. And now we're seeing these things where we get these deflationary events where these multiples that are so high and obnoxious, they just have to come down. So it's actually healthy. Like, people don't like that, but when you do a parabolic move in any asset, basically besides Bitcoin, even Bitcoin, when it goes parabolic for too long, it has to settle down again and kind of fall into its range. But when you see stocks and just stupid companies that don't even make a profit and they do that, they have to come down and they have to reset again to more normal valuations. So yes, I think that's absolutely what's going on. And I think that this decade has a lot more of that to come.
How much blame in particular, or how much of the finger did, I'm trying to figure out the right idiom here, but I'm just going to stop with that. I want to blame Powell for like all of it. Where do they fall? What decisions in your mind was the Fed making that were incorrect? Was it them propping up these markets? Was it them keeping the rates near zero during this bull run? Or is it them trying to slowly increase interest rates? Or is it something that I'm not even thinking about?
I don't blame Powell in particular. I think he's a part of this system that he can't do anything about. He's just a player in the system. It actually reminds me, I'm a former doctor. Doctors are just cogs in this big healthcare system that they can't really do it. You either comply with what the system tells you to do, or you can leave and you can not get paid. Like, that's just kind of how the system works. So a lot of people get angry with doctors, but what it really is the system that they're surrounded by and stuck in. So I think Powell is part of the Federal Reserve central banking system. That's the problem. And that started back in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve. And this whole concept of expanding monetary supply. And then obviously, WTF happened in 1971, right? When we got off the gold standard and fiat just became just complete fiat, worthless, not tied to anything. That was when the real trouble started. And so that's why I think, and that was marking day one of the end of our current fiat, the end of the dollar dominance. We've been seeing this expansion of credit built on nothingness. It's just pure fluff. Everybody in America knows that this is all fluff, right? Your house doesn't go up in value 30% in a year without just like, what is going on, right? And you have that in your stocks, and everybody's a genius because all they had to do is invest in a Vanguard fund, and now they're up, 200% over the last 10 years. All these things are just so obnoxious and ridiculous, and we have so much debt that can never be repaid. And obviously, the consequence of all this is runaway inflation and the demise of the dollar. And so we're in these final innings of that. I don't know what inning we're in, 7th, 8th, 9th, but the dollar is dying before our eyes. It may go on for decades, but we're definitely in the end times of the dollar. And so thankfully, Bitcoin is around, to catch those of us who are kind of, I'll say smart enough to have seen it, or lucky enough to have heard about it, right? And have taken the time to study it. So it's ugly, and it's going to continue to be ugly. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And please, please, please take some of your money and consider putting it into better money, which is Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the answer to all these just insane problems. So I don't blame Powell. I blame the system. And I think it's just going to be more of the same until the dollar dies.
Go for it, Chris?
Yeah, Jeff, I was going to follow up real quick. So obviously there's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I'm not just directing that at Bitcoin. That's kind of markets abroad. I know, my dad just retired end of last year, and luckily he was able to take a lump sum on a pension, and basically he has a lot of money in cash right now, which is a very good position. I told him to be there. Obviously he has a pretty big 401k as well that he's been putting into, and I've kind of got him down the Bitcoin bandwagon. But I guess for Q and I won't speak for Q, but I know for myself, I'm in my late 20s. And I'm not too worried what's going to happen in the next 20 years. I don't plan to retire in at least the next 20 years. Obviously, I'm buying Bitcoin, and that's kind of my strategy. And we all believe that that's going to play out in the long term. But for some of the people that are in their 60s, I guess, what do you recommend? Is it just be all cash? Is it just I don't know. I know my dad is a little nervous that he's got a few years of cash that he can live off of, but just, he worries about his 401k. That's very hard to transition all into Bitcoin. Yeah, there's options like GBTC, but his company had a weird policy that some of it has to be in only the indexes that they offer in his fund.
Yeah. So another good question. So it completely depends on who you are as a person. If you are just like, I don't really care about investments, I have this thing, I don't like thinking about it, but I also don't want to watch it go down. For the easiest thing to do is I'll tell people just right off the bat, just put like 50% of your 401k or your IRA into cash and just keep doing everything you're doing, but put half of it in cash and half of it just keep doing what you're doing. Then if we do have this like really rough, tumultuous year or so, and you don't want to watch your portfolio go down so much, it'll only go down half as much, right? If you're holding a bunch of cash. And then on the other side, hopefully then if we've bottomed and the dust is cleared, then you can just put that all back to work and you'll be happy you did that. I obviously, because of what I do as a fund manager, right? I look at things and I see, okay, all the tea leaves are pointing to bear markets. Everything looks terrible. All the momentum indicators look bad on most of the things. I'm the kind of person, and it's just my rationale. I'm like, why would I sit and hold something I think is possibly going to go down 20 or 30%, right? I get it. Like if you are just the kind of guy that wants to DCA and dollar cost average through all of this and just ride these bumps, that's a fantastic way to do things. You're not paying any taxes if you do that. And so you have to think through all those different things. But if you don't want to see your portfolio go down and you think there's a very strong likelihood it might, I recommend doing the kind of stuff like, besides holding cash, then look for things that are working and invest in those kind of things, And again, energy stocks are great right now. Gold stocks are great. Defense stocks are great right now. Value stocks are doing. Berkshire Hathaway, what a great defense stock. You can just chuck some money in there. Those kind of things should do well even in this type of environment. They might go down, but they're not going to go down quite as much. So that's what I tell people. It depends. I always try to figure out, like, who are you? Like, do you want to like spend time like kind of trading a little bit, or do you just want to be like, hey, it looks kind of bad. I don't want to see my nest egg go down by 40 or 50%. What tip do you have? And I would just say, maybe buy a little gold, put a bunch in cash. But then if they believe in Bitcoin, which, hopefully more and more people start doing, then this is actually a great time to start dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, especially for new people, because even though I don't think we've bottomed yet, we're close to the bottom. And so you want to buy that final little dip wherever we are on that. If you're buying all the way through this, you're going to be really glad a year from now or 2 years from now when we're up here that you are buying in this point right here.
Yeah, and I'll just continue on that. I know Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. I know, obviously, I was a value investor for a while and really respect their opinions. Obviously, we differ in terms of Bitcoin. They've been slugging away cash. I think they have over $100 billion of cash on the sidelines. And I know in 2020 and 2021, basically people were like, oh, this is so dumb. You could have thrown it in a broad index fund, like what they recommend, and made 37% returns, at least in 2020. I know 2021, we had a little bit of a dip. I guess I'm expanding that now. So then while we're going to go through this whole capitulation and go down, what's going to be the trigger that says we're going back up? Are we going to get to, you think, 1% 1% interest rates or 1.5%, and then all of a sudden things are going to be so bad that the Fed's going to have to lower it again? Or is it going to be the crash of oil and then everything else is going to come down and then you're going to think that's more of a bottom as we rally? I guess what would be your sentiment in the long term after, what would be the start of the next bull?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, for me, and I hate to say it like this, but it's actually really easy. I just wait till it flips my momentum indicators bullish. So I don't know what triggers it. Are we going to get a capitulation, or do we just kind of grind painfully lower for the next several months or for a year even? I don't know. Or is there a big war, or is there another COVID variant that comes out of left field and freaks the planet out, and that causes a capitulation? I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. I talk a lot about the Fed, but I don't care about the Fed, because it's the most important thing. And sounds funny to some people, but the price action will tell you. The markets actually discern what's going on. You just have to watch what the markets are doing, right? And so that's how I look at it anyway. So if I see something that's just going down, 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 and then it just kind of goes sideways and starts to go up, and my indicators flash bullish, that's when I flash bullish. And it's literally that simple. And it sounds kind of funny, but it's just like, well, yeah. I mean, it's not even, I don't care why it does. Lots of people cogitate all day on CNBC and Bloomberg and whatever else, trying to figure out what. There's nothing wrong with cogitating, right? It's good entertainment. It's info.
No, I need to stop.
But it makes it. I will tell you that I've almost never met a really good investor that invests based on what they think the news is going to do. Like even last week, they're like, 2 weeks ago, everybody was panicked about Putin and Russia and Ukraine and all this stuff. Last week, we were having like literally almost exactly the same headlines, but the headlines were, people aren't as concerned this week about Russia's invasion, and the Ukraine is like standing up, and that's good. And so that's why stocks are going up. And I just don't buy any of that garbage. I think it's all just the prices do what they do, and I don't care why they do it. And when they flip bullish, I'm flipping bullish, and it's just honestly that simple. And what's good about me, right, is I'm open source. I want to help as many people as possible. I know there's tons and tons of people out there that can't afford to pay the guy like me to manage their money. I literally go on Twitter and say, hey, I'm bullish now. Like, hey, here's what I'm buying now. Like, hey, you know how I was shorting Amazon and I was shorting tech stocks and I was shorting this and that and crypto exchanges and blah, 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 blah. Hey, I'm long now. So obviously I have reasons for doing what I do. And obviously like the system that I've built over the last 8 years, when it tells me that, that's just what I do. And that's what I follow. I don't know what news event will cause it, but I'll be a slave to the system I built.
Jeff, don't give away all your secrets too cheaply now. Now people are going to be rushing to follow you, and they're just going to follow your hedge fund signals. I guess expanding, and not to get political on this, but expanding more to the Russia-Ukraine thing. So obviously Russia, whether I do not agree with what Putin did, his attack of Ukraine, and it's just an atrocity on both sides. War is horrible, horrible, horrible thing. But with that being said, obviously it's in Russia's best interest, and I'm, not supporting them, but it's in their best interest to try and never use the US dollar again. I know that's a little outlandish and that's like a really broad comment. And I know a lot of people say Russia has ties with China to do a digital yuan or to subvert the US dollar. But what people don't realize, and we've talked about the death of the dollar before, is being the global reserve currency means that you need to push your dollars, the Triffin dilemma, I believe is what it is, where you have to export your dollars to everywhere else in the world in order to reap the benefits of being the global reserve currency. Obviously, we have a peg, it's called the petrodollar, to the barrels of oil. But with that being said, won't we see a lot more pain in the markets if Russia, if China, if all these other countries, well, we could just start listing countries that we've hurt in the past, whether it's Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan.
Smack you in the face.
Iran, Afghanistan, or countries like this that have, let's just say, oil-rich nations that decide to opt doing their system. Obviously, that's going to tank the stock market. That's going to tank a lot of things because the dollars aren't finding their ways to prop back up into the stock market. And we could be in a long Great Depression. I hate to bring, fear of, we're going to see 10 years of Great Depression, but that's definitely something that could happen with this. I guess, what are your insights on that at all?
Okay, so several opinions. One is I would say careful with what we think will happen because we just don't know what will happen. We might be surprised to the up, sort of like what happened. Ray Dalio talks about he was working like the market floors, a trading floor back in 1971 when Nixon announced that we were coming off the dollar standard. He came into work the next day thinking the market was just going to tank and go to zero, basically. And what did it do? It went up, and the market's just jacked up after that. Why? Hard to say. You can kind of cogitate again on why it happened. I don't really care again. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think what is going on in Russia, and this is probably my tinfoil hat, but I actually think it's pretty valid. I think Russia and China have been planning a way to get off of the US dollar system as the reserve currency since early last decade. So 2012, 2013, and 2014, they intentionally stopped buying as many US treasuries. They started making a noticeable decline in their purchases because I think figured out that, hey, we're literally supporting our enemy, the US, and their military by buying their treasuries. They're borrowing as much as they want, and we're giving them the money to do that. That seems kind of weird. So I think they figured that out, and China distinctly made, who used to be the largest buyer, they stopped buying US treasuries for the most part and started buying hard assets. They started buying commodities. They started buying land. They started doing all this other stuff. They've been doing that since 2014. Who has picked up the slack? The Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has been printing money to buy the debt of the United States. The United States has been buying the debt of the United States, eating itself. And who pays for that? The citizens who hold the dollars, because the only way to do that mathematically is to devalue the currency as you're doing that. They're printing more and more dollars. They're buying more and more debt that can't be paid in sound money, so they have to pay it in less sound money. And anyways, we're getting off subject here. Russia and China, I believe, have been planning this for about a decade. They wanted to get kicked off of the US dollar system. They now have an excuse to say, hey, look, you kicked us off. Right? Russia got kicked off by the US out of the SWIFT system. Their FX reserves were like stolen basically from them. And they're like, okay, I guess we're going to come up with our own thing. My view, I'm looking 10 years out from now. Here's what I think is going to happen in the next 10 years. I think 10 years, we're going to look back at this event and we're going to say that was kind of a milestone event. In 10 years, there's going to be 3 currencies of significance. The US dollar will still exist, but it will be substantially weaker and less powerful unless they start putting Bitcoin on their reserves, on their balance sheet. 2 is the Chinese yuan. This Chinese CBDC, I think, will have a huge presence and much bigger than it does today in Russia, in most of Asia, in lots of Africa, in parts of Central and South America too. Basically, whoever is friendly towards China today will sort of move on to that as a reserve asset. The people who are friendly to the US will stay on the US dollar system. And then the third, obviously, is Bitcoin. I think all other currencies are going to slowly die this decade, and they're going to fold into one of those 3 things. And at first, I think it goes mostly into the US dollar, then a little bit more will start going into the yuan, and then the Bitcoin will be this kind of rising dark horse, obviously, that we all agree on. And that will be either seen as just a standalone reserve currency or as a backing to these other 2 currencies. China and Russia are using hard assets and gold. They're kind of going with the older playbook. And hopefully, the US will start putting Bitcoin on its balance sheet as a reserve asset. That will strengthen the currency and give it a soundness that it currently obviously does not have.
I'm curious, where in this trifecta scenario, if it is at all involved, does gold fit into the equation?
I think China and Russia are trying to make it part of the equation. They've clearly been net buyers of gold. China basically, if I understand it correctly, nationalized all of the miners, and they're basically keeping all of the gold that they mine. Russia has been buying lots and lots of gold over the last many years as well, and not buying US treasuries. And so I think they're actually trying to go with the old school playbook. And I think also that's where they made their strategic error, right? I very much believe, I'm a believer again of Ray Dalio, his rise and fall of empires. I don't know if you guys read that, The Changing World Order. I totally agree with that. And I think America, we've peaked, and I think we're on the decline. And I think that China is rising, and he's clearly laying that out in his book too. And we're headed for some sort of confrontation at some point. I think China is sort of next up for the next major world power, and then therefore the next major world's reserve currency. They made a critical error last year by banning Bitcoin and kicking it out of their country. Bitcoin is literally like this out of left field. It's like a meteor from outer space that just came, and it's literally going to disrupt history and disrupt the geopolitical world order. And so there's a chance that will disrupt their ascent if they continue to be anti-Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is antithetical to centralized control. It's antithetical to a surveillance CBDC coin that they have and that most other countries are going to go to. That is so much wealth creation and stability that they're pushing and forcing out of their country. That could literally change their ascent from being, I think, from being just an absolute shoo-in to now, I think it's kind of 50-50. If some other country gets smart, basically like if someone who has substantial size and clout, like in pulls in El Salvador, but they're actually like a big country. So like say the US does that, or say Canada, or some, substantial country does it, pulls in El Salvador and makes Bitcoin their reserve currency and does it far before everybody else. The game theory says that they will have such an insurmountable lead that other nations might not be able to catch up with them. So if I were the leader of a country, that's like literally agenda number 1. That's what I would do today. I would be like, hey, look, we need to get Bitcoin miners going. We need to start getting our volcanoes going, man. Let's put a Bitcoin miner on Old Faithful over in Yellowstone, and let's start mining some of this stuff. And let's start strengthening our currency and start thinking 10, 20, 30, 40 years out from now about how we're going to change our outlook from this slow, painful decline that the United States is on to back towards an ascent and an ascent towards greatness.
You heard it here, folks. Future President Dr. Jeff Ross says, turn on the money printers and let's start buying Bitcoin instead of treasuries.
Exactly. Single issue voter, man. That's what I would do.
Yeah, definitely. And Jeff, I think you outlined pretty beautifully that China, we've talked about this before, 2007, 2008 was definitely a milestone in terms of the US dollar with the collapse, the financial collapse that occurred then. And obviously when we were printing all this money to prop up our economies, bail out banks and all this, the ones who weren't getting the money, China. So when they had these flat rates of government debt, whatever it is, 2-year, 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever it was back in 2008, well, we're printing all this money and they're getting a flat rate of return. Basically, the way that we were able to pay them and subsidize them and guarantee that money was printing more money, but it devalued the treasuries that they did have. So obviously China in 2014 was very pissed. They wanted reparations for that. and they decided we're no longer buying treasuries. And what they did is the Belt and Road Initiative that many people have heard, where basically they were buying hard assets of all these countries that needed infrastructure. So dollars would go to China, China would send us goods, then they take those dollars, instead of buying treasuries, put them all around the world. And that's kind of a way that they've become, like what Ray Dalio has outlined, more of a global powerhouse. Obviously, a lot of these countries have dollar-denominated debt that they owe to China to do this. But China would like nothing more to push this digital yuan to those countries. I'm assuming, exactly to your point, Jeff, that in the near future, and they're going to be putting or making people pay their debts in just the digital yuan. And obviously that becomes with great power that they can transform or basically negotiate what they can do to pay that back. If you're not doing X, Y, and Z, if you're not taking our vaccine, if you're not, doing, buying Chinese products, if you're buying US products, we fine you or make it more expensive. It gets to be a very dangerous game. And I don't think many people realize that, where Bitcoin is the counterpunch to all of that. I don't know, Q or Jeff, if you want to comment on any of that.
Q?
Oh, I would love your thoughts on this. I think I've touched on this quite a bit on this show enough.
Sure. So, I just agree with everything you said. I just think we're at this transition point right now. And I think that China is in Russia, again, they definitely, I don't think they're stupid. I think they're doing what they're doing for a reason. I think they have a plan to create basically the next petrodollar gold back yuan, so basically the petro yuan in CBDC surveillance form, which is just awful, by the way. CBDCs are terrible. They're everything fiat offers and less, and just it's just such garbage. So anyways, we're clearly moving to that, and thankfully we have Bitcoin as an alternative and an antithesis to that. But yeah, I think that's just kind of inevitable, and I think they're playing it smart. But again, I think the one huge glaring mistake they're making is they're following the old world playbook. They're basically copying the U.S., what the U.S. did to rise to power, and I think they're going to try to do that and sort of force their way in. And I think they're making a strategic error if they don't incorporate Bitcoin into their strategy. So obviously, I kind of hope they don't, because I don't want to see that world necessarily. I would love a world where Bitcoin is just the power of Bitcoin, right? So whoever controls the money has the power. Whoever controls the money printer literally controls the power in the world. And so if that control goes from the US, which there are lots of reasons to like that, but probably even more reasons to not like that, if it just transfers over to China, there's just going to be lots of the same kind of problems we're having today. It's just going to be to the China's advantage. What I love about Bitcoin is its decentralized nature. It literally spreads the power of money ownership and control to the people around the world in that decentralized manner and totally secure manner as well. So that's the kind of world I want to see. I think most people who understand Bitcoin and who are in it for the long haul, that's one of the main reasons they're here. It's literally just better money for a better world. And it will help to kind of end the run of huge, powerful nation states and these just terrible wars that go along with it. I think that it will make those much more expensive and much less frequent and much less likely to happen. That's my hope with Bitcoin.
Ultimately, power will always corrupt those who have it. So I'm with you there. I want to ask you this selfishly, because I do agree that the worst is yet to come on the markets. I myself have a very heavy cash reserve, but I also get very uncomfortable with inflation just continuing to creep up, whether it's my rent, whether it's me going to the grocery store, whether it's just filling up gas to go see friends. Am I overthinking it on a month over month basis, or is there a better place to be parking money as far as just like for a 6-month period of time? I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, so again, the easiest thing is just a dollar cost average into Bitcoin, right? So, and I know you guys are doing that. I'm doing that too. Just slowly, little by little, converting my fiat into real money, real sound money. But people get uptight when I talk about cash. Look, I'm not stupid. I understand cash, the value is devaluing like month over month, year over year. But there are periods of time where you want to hold a safe haven asset. When everything is just falling to the ground and falling apart all around you, the US dollar still is, like it or hate it, still is the world's reserve currency. It's still the safe haven asset that people go to in risk off situations. So if we think we're going to have a serious risk off event, you just want to hold cash. I'm not saying hold cash for decades. That's really stupid to do that. I say that, I've tweeted this several times. Bank checking and savings account are where your money goes to die. I really believe that. You're literally just saying, like, I want to be poor 10 years from now if I put my money in the bank. So that's my view for the long term. For the short term, though, there are seasons. Like, I'm totally with Greg Foss. I'm totally anti-US treasuries and bonds. Nobody should ever hold these things for, more than a short period of time. There are periods where they outperform, though, and where you can actually make money holding US treasuries because they are safe haven assets. And when everything else is falling apart, when people are selling stocks and even selling, their crypto, some people sell their Bitcoin, which I never recommend. Treasuries can do well. So can gold. I would not hold any of those for the long term, but I would hold those for a very short period of time if I feel like the floor is going to drop out. And then I would quickly convert them to Bitcoin for sure at number one. And then maybe if you have your eyes on stocks, real quick tangent, I love investing. Obviously, I love saving in Bitcoin. That's the most important thing. I think the majority of people's portfolios should be in that. But I also love investing in companies that I feel like are changing the world for the better. And then I can find them at a good price. So if I see some company that I like and I want it to succeed, like I just like this company and I think that it will also be a profitable investment, I love to invest in those kind of companies as well. So I look forward to these big market dropouts, these flushing events where valuations go from whatever price to sales ratio of 20 down to a price to sales ratio of 1 or 2. Those are when I'm going to be licking my chops. I'm going to be taking this cash I have on the side and putting some into these companies and putting them to work for the long haul.
It's funny how easy it is to buy Bitcoin, especially in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as easy to buy just like a solid brick of gold. God help you if you actually wanted to try, as I like to tease my dad from time to time. We should have just been storing some oil in some of the empty bedrooms in my parents' house when they were paying you to essentially store oil.
Mm-hmm.
What effect are you paying attention to in the public markets as far as Bitcoin? We had Goldman Sachs claim something about they essentially completed a successful options trade using Bitcoin. We keep pushing for a Bitcoin ETF. When that day will come remains to be seen. Is there anything in the public markets in relation to Bitcoin that you're really keeping a close eye on?
Well, first of all, I think about 90% of the news that comes out about Bitcoin is wildly bullish for the long term. Like, we're just seeing these amazing announcements all the time. Countries that are starting to contemplate it. More countries are thinking about making it legal tender. Companies want to put it on their balance sheets. All of the huge old school banks are starting to offer it to their clients. Their trade, so everything about it to me says the Bitcoin network is in full expansion mode. We're watching the infrastructure layer get built out. I love that, especially from being a finance guy. Like, I want to see it be really easy to own Bitcoin, and for as many people as possible. I want to see the old timers and the pensioners and the baby boomers with their 401ks. I want it to be easy for them to get in Bitcoin, even though by far the smartest, wisest, best way to own Bitcoin, right, is to own it, get it off an exchange and put into cold storage and have that self-sovereignty. Lots of people are just waiting for it to get easier. And so when it becomes more convenient, that's going to bring another wall of trillions of dollars, I think, into it. And that's where we go from a $1 trillion asset to we surpass gold and become a $10+ trillion asset. So I'm watching all of those things and I see basically nothing but good news. Even politicians who are saying like negative things about it, it's clear if you take a step back and you look at the progression over the last few years, we've gone from basically nobody talking about it to a couple of weird people talking about it to people basically just bashing it to now there's a good number of politicians who come out publicly and say they're pro Bitcoin. And I think obviously that's just a trend that's going to be another inevitable trend that we're just going to see. And pretty soon everybody is like 100% in favor of the dollar because you have to be, because that's just what's ubiquitous. Bitcoin will at some point, I think, be forced on everybody and become ubiquitous in the world. And so we won't even talk about it anymore because it's just, it's just what it is. So I look at all those things with favor. Again, I don't make any of my trades based on that kind of thing. All of that does is give me lots of confidence that Bitcoin over the long run is still going way up here and we're only way down here right now. And so I don't know how fast that will go, but I do know that at some point it will be up here. And it just gives me tremendous confidence that just buying and holding it for the long term is a really, really sound strategy.
One last question, then we will let you get back to your real job. We know already the perfect legislation is adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. Is there any other specific legislation or on the other side, any other legislation you'd like them to not pass in regards to Bitcoin?
Some legislation I'd like to see. Well, regarding the legal tender thing, I would love to have it not be a taxable event every time we want to buy it. Like, I want to be on a Bitcoin standard. I want to just buy it. I want to own it, and then I want to, if I need to buy a lamp or something, or I need another lava lamp right there, I need another one that I can, sell some Bitcoin, buy a lava lamp, and I don't create a taxable event. That's such a hassle, and it's so ridiculous. So I would love to see them pass something like that, where they quit treating it like it's real estate and treat it just like it is. What I think it is just a better money. It's just a currency. So I know a lot of people don't like that for other reasons, but to me, I think that would be the, I think it's inevitable, by the way, that that's going to happen. But I wish it would happen sooner than later. Something that they don't pass, I think we got to be a little bit careful about what we wish for as far as getting too many politicians on board, because they may take it with their legislation in directions that we don't want to see it go. And so I would just instruct people to try to be as careful as possible and to always consider Bitcoin as it's outside of the system. So think of it as this just perennial outsider that it has its own deal, its own protocol. It's very different from the fiat system, and that's what's good about it. And so try not to fold it into the fiat system too much. Like, even for instance, like I'm going to kind of double speak a little bit. A huge event for Bitcoin will be when when the SEC approves a spot Bitcoin ETF that will bring in a flood of money. But that's not necessarily what's best for Bitcoin or for Bitcoin users. The best for Bitcoin users is to own it yourself and have self-custody of it. The ETF will make it really, really convenient, but now we're centralizing it and we're creating a whole different type of risks, custody risks and other kind of risks to that Bitcoin. And so careful what you wish for. That may make the value go up, but it may kind of steal a little part of the soul of it all. And so just kind of keep fighting for what's right is what I would say. Kind of like the founding fathers in the United States, right? Like, we have our Constitution, we have what we knew was right, and we've strayed a really, really, really long ways from there now, and they're probably all rolling over in their graves right now. I think that's probably going to happen with Bitcoin too. But so I think those of us who are earlier in the game, we just got to keep fighting for the ethos of Bitcoin all along the way.
Dr. Jeff Ross, I could honestly spend days talking to you. I think our time, unfortunately, has come. Can you just let everyone know where they can find you online on social medias?
Sure. So as far as social media is concerned, I only really spend time on Twitter. So my handle is @VailshireCap, VailshireCap. And then if you want to learn more about my investment style, I don't do things at all like most investment advisors do or financial planners. So, but if you kind of want to do it a different way and you want to check that out, go to vailshire.com. I send out a monthly newsletter and a quarterly thing for my hedge fund too, to keep my clients apprised with what I'm doing. And reach out anytime. Thanks, guys, for having me on. I'm looking forward. You guys are both going to be in Miami, yes, in a couple of weeks?
Yep, we're both going to be there. So we get the privilege of spending a few days with Dr. Jeff Ross down in Miami, and we can spend hours talking about all this. You can too by going to b.tc/conference. Use the code YTMAG. Come see Q, myself, and Dr. Jeff Ross speak at the conference. Really looking forward to seeing everyone there.
We're going to quick. What? The only person speaking is Jeff Ross. Chris and I are not being given a mic.
Oh no, we're not speaking, but we will be there. We will be.
You guys should. You guys are awesome. I hope next year you'll be speaking for sure.
Sounds good.
No. Guys, stick around through the commercials. We're gonna leave you all in Chris's capable hands as well. So if you miss my curly hair, I'll be back tomorrow.
Yep. Peace out. Nolan, you know how it is. How are you?
I love life and happy to be here with another episode of The Breakup. The show is all about contrasting the relationships that go into making dollars with the relationships that go into making Bitcoin. So it's all about our relationship with money. And we like to compare and contrast fiat with Bitcoin and all the different things that can happen. And today's show might actually change your life. It might change your life. It's not just a little show about trading your relationship with dollars for Bitcoin. It might change your entire life, because we got an assist from our good friend Giacomo Zucco, an old Bitcoiner, who I think really has sort of mapped out the character and personality types of Bitcoin, because this show is all about the breakup. It's all about imagining that we are in this relationship with money, and the characterization of that relationship can actually be in a sort of microcosm, show the personas, let's say, that make the world go round. So we're going to compare those today. And because I did mention the world is coming at you fast and the future is here before you know it, it looks like, if you saw this weekend anyway, today's Monday, it looks like the video that was going all around was we have flying cars now. There's a flying car, the Tesla that flew into the sky. And but it did make me think. So it reminded me of something. I took responsibility, let's say, a few weeks ago for being wrong about a prediction on the show. I said Russia would not invade Ukraine. Now, the reason I did it, so I said no. And I right away when it happened, came on the show and I said, I got it wrong. However, the reason I got it wrong looks more and more right. I got it wrong because I predicted that Russia would get smashed, beaten, destroyed, that tanks and none of this stuff made sense anymore. And we made that prediction on this show before the invasion even took place. And the reason we said it is basically because of these flying vehicles, for lack of a better word. What we saw with the Tesla was really just, let's say, the proto versions. Forget the Tesla for a second. What we're seeing with the war is the proto version of flying cars, in the sense that it's just an engineering problem. The payload that these drones are taking, and these are not the drones that go up to space with rocket engines and all that. These are small drones with propellers that are able to shoot their targets down below and map them. So when I see that the capacity of the drone is getting better and better and better, the idea of flying cars now is not a science problem. It's not a science problem anymore. We don't have to invent something new in order to have flying cars. It's really just an engineering problem now. It's just an engineering problem. And we've seen in the history of war that it really can speed up the process of engineering, especially for commercial products. And we're going to talk a bit about that when we compare, let's say, the psychological engines behind fiat and behind Bitcoin and fiat today. But we've seen in wars before that you can really speed up the process of product development when it comes to these deadly machines. And so the prediction is, forget about the Tesla flying vehicle for a second, and forget about who's right or wrong about war. And we always have to remember there's real people dying, so we can't just be excited about the future. In this case, this is a sad story what's going on over there, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better, and these things are being used for the worst things possible. However, we can see the pieces in place for these drones to actually start carrying peaceful missions and people and things. And it looks like a lot of that is not too far away. But the whole engineering piece brings me to, I think, the heart of the issue today. And so first of all, let's just take a look at this chart. So Giacomo Zucco, who gave me the inspiration for this today, is a fellow from Italy. I guess he lives in Switzerland now. I've known him for a long time. He was one of those people, even for me, when I joined the whole Bitcoin world years ago now, almost 10 years ago, there had already been people who thought things through. You'd arrive to something and say, oh, I'm the first person, 2013, 2014 to think about this. And then you read and you look on some forum somewhere or some chat room, and it had actually all been, kind of figured out or at least discussed. And this guy, Giacomo Zucco, is one of the people that was sort of all around this stuff. He was talking about, Austrian school and Bitcoin in the earliest days. He was talking about some of the scaling wars and optimizing from the engineering front. And this weekend in Las Vegas, he gave a long talk. It was about an hour long. I'll recommend it to all of you. But if you want the gist of it, what he did was he created this profile, something he said he's been working on for a while. And it's a little bit like the history of Bitcoin in a sense, but it shows, in this show, we think of money as a psychological engine. We don't care about the accounting. We don't care about the numbers. We don't care about the math. What we care about is there enough momentum, or are there enough people involved for it to go forward and perpetuate and to attract people and to attract interest, right? You want people to be interested. Interest is not only the amount of money paid on money to lend it out. It's also literally, are people interested in this thing? And what he decided was, or what he shared at that conference was, he's been working on it for years, but he'd sort of come up with this profile of the psychology of Bitcoin. I'll call it that. That's my word. That's not what he called it. But he put these profiles together to describe how Bitcoin grew and who's still behind it, perpetuating this psychological engine and perpetuating interest. So he started with this concept that revolutionaries, actually, he started with engineers, and I would agree. Historically, engineers overlapping with revolutionaries in this cypherpunk section here. So you might not be able to see this, but this is a hooded guy behind a laptop. I try to take the icon of a hacker, and do it. But it says cypherpunks here, and you've got a hooded guy behind a laptop here. So the cross section of engineers and revolutionaries were really the first class. They were the first class of Bitcoiners. They were the first ones to say, okay, this and that. I always said the first group to come next were the first non-sentimental group to get into Bitcoin. By non-sentimental, the revolutionaries had a mission, the engineers had a mission, but the speculators, the early Wall Street people, Chad Karskarilla from Paxos, right? This guy was just kind of laid off from the meltdown, and then his hedge fund wasn't that active and wasn't able to do a lot of stuff in New York City in 2011 with Occupy This and Wall Street and who knows what's going on and who's funding all this stuff. And so he literally, out of like a normal Wall Street thing, started mining Bitcoin. They would go to the buttonwood trees to trade it, where like in the early days of the stock exchange, there was a tree where people in New York would trade stocks under. And so this whole culture was there at the time, but these were the first non-sentimental people. So the speculators entered here. And he puts this disruptor piece down there. That's sort of the Silicon Valley people. That's the people with an elevator pitch. And he had a great joke. The people with an elevator pitch, and they give it to you in the elevator, but sometimes you want to get off. And I thought that was really funny. And so what he said was, if you combine these revolutionaries, the engineers, and the speculators, and you take all of the Venn diagrams and the overlap, in the middle you have what is really the Bitcoin psychology, the Bitcoin psychological engine. If you take these three pieces here, each of them working in concert, you sort of see where the momentum is coming from. People who want a better world, who are then able to not have to think too much about the money, let's say, or the protocol, or how P2P cash might work in an electronic environment. The engineers have figured it out. There is certainly the verify piece, but let's be honest, I can't check the work of core devs, and I can't check the work of the Bitcoin system. I can certainly check my UTXOs and things like that, but I can't do much more than that. So in some cases, the ability to, let's say, take the mental load off of speculating and money and engineering money and communicating money goes away when you can trust the engineers in that way. So in this way, we start to see the whole piece. The speculators are a big part of it, because if there was no market for Bitcoin and other things, then Bitcoin would lose a lot of its interest, because people certainly would, number go up. What do you call them? You're caught between the number go up crowd and the, scale everything and go crazy. So what I ended up doing was saying, okay, this definitely makes sense for the psychology of Bitcoin. I certainly see what Giacomo is saying. And I compared it to Bretton Woods 2 and 3. The reason I compared it to Bretton Woods 2 and 3 is, and I'm arguing here that's already a fact, that Bretton Woods of just America is already, we're not going to be analyzing that one. We're only using Bretton Woods 2, which is the post-71 version of Bretton Woods, when the US dollar, not gold, not a dollar backed by gold, just the dollar is the primal currency in the market, and through which most markets are formed, including that of oil. So I'm saying here that's over. And there's already now 2. I think that was always inevitable. I think, even with Ukraine and Russia, that people would have a demand for Chinese yuan was always going to happen. It's the biggest consumer market in the world. So I'm not going to chalk this up to a failure necessarily on the part of the US government, though there isn't many good things to say these days. But it seems like it was a natural progression anyway. And really why we were interested in Bitcoin from the start, because if the US dollar couldn't keep its hegemonic position in global finance, the Chinese dollar was coming, or the Chinese currency was coming. And so it's always been my belief that to avoid any of these countries, Bitcoin was absolutely necessary, because if it's not going to be the political, if it's not going to be the dollar, which somewhat resists being political, although that's completely false at this point. There was an idea 12 years ago that the dollar resisted being political. I don't think we're in that world anymore. If we didn't have the dollar, we would have an overtly political dollar run by the People's Bank of China. And that's where we were headed, right? Well, that's where we were headed. So Bitcoiners early on understood this and said, no political dollar, we're going to do it this way. I do want to mention, though, one of the amazing things before we even get into what's different about these two psychological engines. And it's about a little factoid about the history of America that a lot of people don't actually think about, even if they're American. And that is that while you see here that speculators are in both of these psychological engines, one difference is revolutionaries, where I've got the don't tread on me snake. And if you're not American and don't know what the don't tread on me stake, this was a big symbol of 1776. And if I did the drawing right, this was actually partitioned into 13 parts for the 13 colonies, each of them representing a piece of the snake that was going against the crown and Great Britain, and continues to be a symbol of anti-authority in America and revolutionary spirit. But here's the amazing part of America. All revolutions in history, all of them, excluding America, were done by those with everything to win and nothing to lose. The Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, you can go through history and think of all these. There could be ones that I don't know. I obviously don't know everything about history, but when I look at all the revolutions we know about that changed things, that changed their order, it was generally by outsiders, generally done by people who really had nothing to lose. What was Castro? Castro just got out of jail before he went back to Cuba and did his thing. And that's sort of the case in a lot of countries. The United States of America is alone in that the elite of the time conducted the revolution. We've never seen that before or after, as far as I can tell, where someone like George Washington, in a patrician world based on more or less a feudal agricultural economy or a mixed agricultural economy, George Washington's one of the richest people in the world. He owned thousands of acres in Virginia, basically the best land. That's like owning thousands of acres in France. And that would have made him one of the most powerful, whatever, dukes in the world. And I believe many times he was offered king titles, everything in order to not do the war. Now, if he lost, it was over, right? He was done with. There was no one letting him keep his money or anything. And Jefferson and Ben Franklin's the same. Ben Franklin was a hero in England. He was a celebrity, an inventor. He was the original Steve Jobs. He would go over to England. He used to wear funny American clothing because Europeans expected it of him. They thought he was some wilderness guy. So he would wear the Davy Crockett hat and all this furs because they thought he was some guy in a canoe going around settling lands and all that stuff. And he would play to it because he knew it gave him persuasive power and he could manipulate all of these aristocrats with his abilities. And he was one of the original Americans. I think people have always credited him with being an original American in the line of Mark Twain or any one of these other fun people that America has produced over the years. So that whole piece there makes a big difference, that revolutionaries actually created America. And if I think about it, you could actually take this Bitcoin mental map away. You can take this psychological engine away, and you can make this America pre-Bretton Woods, because America was founded by those revolutionaries, which makes it totally different than any other nation. As I said, this is not a revolution run by some illegitimate son or a claim to a throne or none of that stuff. It was a bunch of people saying, I got a better idea. I got a better idea than that. And your idea is actually not that bad. You've done so far so good, but we can do it even better. And that's what happened. So, and when we say engineers here, remember that early Americans had obviously complete freedom to do this stuff. And we saw the types of engineering marvels that happened with the use of the country expanding, and we saw the canals being dug and the bridges getting built and all these amazing things. And we can imagine that engineers, before communications sort of took over in America as one of the most important facets of American foreign policy and domestic policy, the Hollywood machine, the mainstream media, the even revolutionary media, the satellites and the internet and all those pieces, before media really took over at the core of the system, engineers still, it seems in history, had a much larger role. Not that they don't now, but we'll get into what's different. So here's what ends up becoming different when I compare these two. Now we do have, instead of revolutionaries, we have these sort of nations that need to be preserved in their own minds, I suppose. And of course, one can't fault them for being stuck on that idea of self-preservation and self-perpetuation, right? That's what I think every Bitcoiner wants as well. We want to perpetuate Bitcoin. We want to make a better economy. And I think these guys, we can't mind read them, but one would imagine they do have good intentions, at least as far as wanting to affect a positive change. Maybe they want too much reward for it. Maybe they want too much credit for it. Maybe they have egos, like any human, right? We don't need to go over every one of their failings. But the difference here is that instead of engineers, and this is what I'm going to say about Bitcoin is purely psychological, but the engineers are behind it. But with the Bretton Woods system, with this system of governments issuing money, the argument here is that it's almost all persuasion and messaging and sales and marketing instead of engineers. And the Giacomo Zucco piece reminded me of another, when I had the idea for this compare and contrast, it wasn't just Giacomo Zucco's map. It was a fellow named Naval, who we all know. We all hear about Naval a lot. Naval Ravikant, maybe one of the smartest people in the world, has a lot of hot takes, gets some wrong, gets some right, but had a great one that triggered me into doing this, which was, he said, if you're doing, how did he write it? Let me get the exact quote. The exact quote was, if you're doing sales because you failed at marketing. You're doing marketing because you failed at product. You're doing product because you failed at engineering. And now, I don't want to put engineers necessarily on a much higher pedestal than everyone else in all other industries. Hi, sweeties, just give me a second. I got to finish this. Yeah, go sit over there, sweeties. I'll be right there. So the point is not to put engineers above marketing people or salespeople. It's merely to say that there is an order of things or an order of talents or whatever. And if you're just in the sales and marketing piece to drive an entire economy, you're missing out on other talents. And you're also opening yourself up to a lot of trouble. And that's why you see whenever the sales and marketing piece from a Fed Reserve, if they don't speak with confidence, if they mix their words, if they say a wrong thing, it sets off the speculators, right? It sets off the speculators because in this system, it's either weapons, right, which they're helping to create using their connections to government and policy. And we see now in the war, I said I got one right with the drones and all that. I'll say about a weapon I got wrong. I saw that hypersonic weapon the Russians shot into Ukraine this week, and I said, whoa, that's along the same lines of what I'm saying. I can't imagine tanks are really going to make it anymore, or even a whole thing of airplanes. What if there's a bunch of these hypersonic weapons zipping around the world? What happens to military bases? Do you need one anymore? Is there a point? Are you just waiting for it to get destroyed? What else is there? So you can actually see that the weapons that are being built will change war entirely. And it looks like all the types of machines that were built in the last era of war to help keep the oil machine going, tanks, planes, ships, aren't quite as useful as they were in the last iteration. It looks like the drones and some of these really sophisticated rocket weapons. I'm not even sure if the hypersonic weapon is in the rocket category anymore. What is it? I don't even know. It just looked like a beam of light flying across the sky. It was pretty incredible. But the problem then becomes that when it becomes sales and marketing and tied to oil and tied to weapons, if anything else leaks out, if anything else isn't contained in this pile, it's got to be explained, it's got to be messaged. And that's why it's a constant barrage nowadays of psyops and messaging and all kinds of people trying to get your attention on this and on that. And when you look at the I in Bitcoin and how actually focused it's getting, with people thinking about consumption more, people thinking about all kinds of information asymmetry more, understanding markets more. Did anyone see that video of the girl today at the Public Banking Policy Institute? There's like a 10 to 12-year-old girl today at the Institute for Public Banking Institute speech. So first up, the Public Banking Institute is a think tank that is sort of aligned with what Bitcoiners are interested in. It's a very Austrian school type of institution. Now, these guys have been at that fight for a long time and haven't really been getting anywhere. Bitcoiners have made way more headway on these efforts than they have. And my argument here is that all these people working actually help focus the I in the middle. They help focus the Bitcoiner psychologically and in ways that we can't see. And that sort of incentive alignment contrasts heavily with the incentive misalignment we see more and more in the fiat world. So if you compare, for example, this unbelievable, now I think Bloomberg is starting to troll us as a matter of clickbait or whatever, but they have this absurd line that they're on these past couple of days about how to help people who are earning under 300,000 US dollars a year deal with inflation. I'm telling you, it's a troll. This is a psyop unto itself. Targeting the 300,000 group, all of it was for attention. They know what they're doing. Okay, if they are surprised that crypto Twitter is sitting there going, "Oh my God, look at these guys! What's going on in the world?" 1 second. Yeah. Then you're getting fooled. You're getting tricked, right? Be careful of these folks. They know what they're doing. They're putting the 300K number out there deliberately to get people to react. Because if they put it hurts people who make 50K most, it's just another news article. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. No one pays attention. If they put the 300K, they got what they got today, which was every single person retweeting it. Every single person go, "Oh, look how stupid Bloomberg is." They're not stupid. They're not stupid. Okay, they're not stupid. They chose it on purpose. Even the idiotic information and advice they gave you is a part of a psyop. In a way, right? In a way, it's a part of it. It's not trying to get you to believe in America and sing the national anthem. It's not that kind of psyop. They just want their piece of the pie. They just want their name in the conversation today. And they got it. They got it, right? So they told us to not buy in bulk, right? It's crazy. Eat lentils instead of meat, right? Crazy stuff. And then if you take a look at this girl as well, who described things so accurately, but once again, she's only got a part of that focus, not so much what Bitcoiners are getting, although it's the same story. So when you compare those two, right, it starts to become clear, as far as I'm concerned anyway, that these guys here, this Bretton Woods 2 and 3 system, to keep the eye focused, to keep everyone rallying around that. The speculators can do their job. Everyone involved in the oil industry, the weapons industry, they're all going to keep trying to push people towards the middle. However, every time inflation erupts, you get Canada right now. Canada's got a problem because the Teamsters. So we hear about supply chains and fertilizer because of the Ukraine and Russia war currently. All right, well, Canada is one of the other big suppliers, potash. It's a big part of it. Now there's going to be terrible potash problems in Canada. They're all going on strike because the union is fighting with the collective bargaining entity. I guess it's the government to get it out. I'm not sure exactly who the parties are here, but I know that all of potash extraction and supply chains are going to be shut down because of collective bargaining. And that's related to inflation. The whole thing's related to inflation. So the more and more inflation gets out of control, the more and more they're going to have to use the messaging, the sales, and the marketing to keep people focused and to keep the eye centered, to keep people's attention in one place. But there's tons of misdirects. There's tons of people preying on your attention. And the argument here is that Bitcoin enjoys a tremendous advantage because of this. An advantage that's so great that once again, I think that we are in a situation where the hyper-Bitcoinized world is more and more likely. It's a much greater chance of happening than not now to be able to respond simply because these problems exist. All right. karate lesson is happening today, so I've got a lot of kids waiting for karate. So I don't think I'm going to get too much more in, Chris.
All right, no worries. Nolan, thank you so much for the breakdown. Before you leave, I'll say, you and Naval are pulling at my heartstrings. I consider myself an engineer, saying that up at the top, but I ultimately left the engineering profession to go do Bitcoin things. So I guess I'm more on the marketing side because I saw the old way of engineering was kind of dying. We were never trying to innovate. It was just trying to get the plant to keep running. And we were just trying to get money to pay our bills, basically.
Well, that's one argument that I've always thought that some of the crypto people have that's really strong. And it's this, and I'm not trying to push coins or anything like that, but here's the argument that cryptographers, security engineers, and all these folks used to just be a little unit you'd hire in your company, and they would, have to do their job and report to the CEO, and the CEO would say, no, you're stupid. I'm not putting money into security and I don't care. And your thing is stupid. We're not doing it. But what ended up happening was this, because of all these ICOs and these crypto startups, not endorsing any of them, I mean, as a general human resources question, was actually quite good because it put security people in charge of companies, more or less. And I'm not saying these are decentralized things, these are definitely companies, but it put engineers in charge for one of the first times in a long time. It was another thrust to put engineers in charge. I know Web 2 had all that stuff as well once already. You didn't need a coin and all that, but it gave it a whole new life and did it again. So
thank you so much, Nolan. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one. For those of you that are still on the stream, awesome. Thank you for being with us. Make sure you get your tickets to Bitcoin 2022. We are only 17 days away. All you need to do is go to b.tc/conference. Use the code YTMAG at checkout for 10% off your tickets. Really looking forward to seeing you and so many of the great people we had on this panel today on this show there at Bitcoin 2022, as well as many great Bitcoin plebs. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern with a slew of great guests. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Peace.